Here we go.
Good afternoon, everybody. And today is Wednesday, May 12th, and today is our board meetings for our committee meetings. Today we'll be talking education support and student achievement. Today, education support had a couple of changes in this agenda. First, I'd like to say that welcome everybody today to the board meeting here with the district. And as we move forward, I'm just going forward. Our agenda was originally Say Yes to Education was going to present information about our summer programs and scholarships. That right now would be moved until next month to our June meeting, which I believe is June 16th. There's a couple of things that need to be finalized, a couple of items, and that and they'll be ready to present next month. I think it's very important about our meeting for our summer programs and summers and scholarships opportunities for our children. So that would be moved to the June meeting. We will go on.
That date, it'll be June 9th for
June
education support. Yes.
Okay, that's the board meeting on the 16th. Okay.
Correct.
Go to June 9th. Thank you, Dr. Brownhall.
Absolutely.
And today, education support, we also will be moving our domestic violence program because the seriousness of it and a couple of things that affected our district and our children within our district. One person to name is Renisha Johnson Lely, who was a student over at MST school. And she was succumbed to a domestic violence incident last month. And we're still going through a couple of things, and students are experiencing some hardships because, you know, that loss, because she was a brilliant young lady and had a brilliant mind and a brilliant career ahead of her. And so the seriousness of this topic, we want to do a robust presentation next month on this so that we can address the issues of domestic violence within our district. So we will go ahead and move on with mental health presentation by Dr. Tanja Williams. And to start off, we will also talk about a sports update with Nate Kuzma, our legal counsel for the district, to give an update about our sports program and some information and interest that we have with the Section 6. So we start off with Mr. Kuzma at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Hurd and board members. I'm here tonight on behalf of Dr. Cash, and I want to update you first in regard to the appeal to Section 6 and a recommendation that I have moving forward off of that appeal. And then on two other issues, which I know board members are hearing. I've heard from a number of board members that there have been some issues and concerns in regard to modified sports, as well as the combined swimming program as we head into next year. And so I have a brief update for you on those 2 points as well. But first, I wanted to talk about Section 6. You know, as you all know, I'm sure you've read and heard, you know, the Bennett football team qualified to play last Friday in a semifinal game against Lancaster. Unfortunately, Bennett was unable to, they had to go on pause due to the fact that one of the student athletes had COVID-19, and that pause ended this past Monday, 2 days ago. The district had petitioned Section 6 to move the Lancaster game to Tuesday. The Section 6 Executive Committee declined to grant that request, indicating that they were consistent in the fact that they did not move any games during the playoffs, either during the basketball or the football season. And so they were adamant that they would not move the game, and therefore Bennett had to forfeit. The district appealed that decision this past Saturday to Section 6's Executive Committee, and you know, basically, you know, pled with them because, because we felt it would be in the best interests of the student athletes for the student athletes to participate and settle the score out on the field, which would have been consistent with how Section 6 has handled previous situations during the regular season, including an issue with the district's McKinley football team a couple of years ago, where Kenmore had canceled a game and that was rescheduled for the following week. with Section 6, citing its preference to let the student athletes settle the score on the field, which ultimately did happen in that case. Unfortunately, Section 6 decided and the executive committee decided to uphold its decision and deem the game a forfeit. Michael House, our athletic director, and Principal Alvarez from Bennett attended the appeal. I also attempted to attend, but I was precluded from attending because Section 6 indicated that they would reschedule it if I attended because they needed their legal counsel present at the meeting. And so I sat outside and waited for the meeting to conclude. There is an opportunity to appeal again to a broader committee within Section 6. And in order to make an adequate recommendation to you, I have requested the video from the meeting with Section 6's executive committee so I may review it and see what discussion would have so I can see it for myself. My understanding is that they were quite upset at the fact that the district had appealed the decision and also that it had made its way to the media, and certainly a lot of attention and angst was focused on that as opposed to the actual merits of the appeal. In addition to the fact that, it seemed as if the decision had already been made and they were just holding this hearing on, it wasn't really a hearing, it wasn't a deliberative body, it was a body that had already made its decision prior to us ever walking into the room. And it was disappointing because, they could have very easily rescheduled this game and moved the championship game to a different day. And there would have been no prejudice to the student athletes because the championship game is the last game of the season. Usually in the championship, they're played at Ralph Wilson Stadium, and then there are games that take place after that. But that was not the case this season. The championship game is the last game. And so really, in our view, what they did was deprive student athletes who have been through an awful lot over the course of the past year of participating for one last time, and certainly our seniors, maybe the last time they've ever played a game of football, from participating in this sporting event. And so it was really unfortunate. But moving forward, whether we appeal that decision or not, an appeal is not going to result in the game.
He has people that he's running.
Whoever number ends with 6713, please mute.
Well,
continue, Mr. Kuzma.
Thank you, Dr. Brownhall. Regardless, the appeal will not result in the game being played. But one thing I think is of importance, and one thing that we also made awareness to that I think I would recommend that we continue to take up is our Buffalo City School District's lack of representation on the Section 6 Executive Committee. The Section 6 Executive Committee is the power structure of Section 6 that makes the critical decisions, that executes the critical decisions, and as the school district that pays a large proportion of the dues of Section 6, roughly $90,000 per year, we represent about a third, if not more, of the total composition of Section 6. And I think it's time that we call for more proportional, equitable, and diverse representation on Section 6's Executive Committee. The Executive Committee is made up of the former president, the president-elect. They have a superintendent's representative. They have a principal's representative. They have a boys representative and a girl representative. And all of these are basically representatives from suburban schools that represent the suburban interests. And that's probably, you know, the point of view that they're taking, which I guess is their right. But certainly our district has no say, and our student athletes are not represented at that table. There previously was only one female representative. I think there are now two. There is no person of color that sits on this deliberative body, despite the fact that there are many teams, many districts that have a significant number of student athletes that are persons of color. And it's certainly, as a deliberative body, as a decision-making body, I think that in this day and age, it's appalling that that representation does not sit at that table, making decisions on behalf of the student athletes, not only from the city of Buffalo, but elsewhere. And so what I'm recommending is that, and I've talked to the board president about this, who's willing to be the lead sponsor, is that we consider a resolution next week demanding proportional, equitable, and diverse representation on Section 6's executive committee. And tonight I've heard, you know, I sent an email out earlier. I have heard from a few board members, but because I don't want to bring a resolution that on behalf of the board that may not have, you know, the board support, I want to offer that as an opportunity and see whether the board wishes or is going to request me to draft that resolution for your consideration next week.
Yes. At this time, we would like to allow our board members to reflect on the Section 6 and the resolution and the future of our children here in the Buffalo Public School District. So if anyone would like to comment, please raise your hand. Okay. I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Mr. Hurd, I apologize. I see Mr. Scott's hand.
Thank you. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So I think Mr. Kuzma really broke this down quite well. There's not much more that I'd like to add other than I strongly agree with what he shared and what he's proposing to do. I would just add, along with what Mr. Kuzma shared, we are the largest district in Section 6, the largest district in Western New York. We're the second largest district in New York State. So it only makes sense and it's only fair that we have some representation on that executive committee. So I fully support a resolution requesting that we have that representation. So thank you, Mr. Kuzma and Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Next, we have Jennifer McCosey, Westside Board District member.
Member Hurd. So I also I didn't respond to the email, but I would like to also put my strong support toward this resolution. And I believe that there's a narrative, and it's public, that, you know, it's a good old boy network running some things, and Buffalo being, as Larry stated, you know, the second largest district in the entire state. We not only need, but we deserve a seat at that table. We have a unique population. We have talent beyond, and it's about time that we're recognized. So I strongly support this, and I appreciate and thank you for putting this forward. And thank you, President Kottman, for putting this forward.
Thank you, Ms. McCosey. Next, we have board member Kathy Evans-Brown.
Oh, I just concur with everything that has been said. I think our $90,000 speaks for itself, and this is no longer a status quo. We want a voice. We need to follow our money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown. And next we have board member Paulette Woods.
Already sent in my concurrence in writing that if we pay $90,000, we should have a voice, and that if you can't beat our children on the field, you don't cancel their games in an unfair manner. I am livid. This has to change.
Thank you, Paulette Woods. And I believe that concludes our board members. I would like to say, first of all, thank you, Mr. Kuzma, for taking the time to reflect and try to make a positive impact on what's happening here with the Section 6 and our children in the Buffalo Public Schools. I know myself, the Athletic Hat Committee, Sharon Belton-Cotman, Jennifer McCosey, Lou Petruski, who cannot be here today, all had public meetings, and we sat down with many community members that talked about getting inclusion into the executive board with the Section 6 and having to say so in the decision about moving forward. We know last year, and I still receive calls from the Coalition for Fair and Free Athletics here with the Buffalo Public Schools that work for themselves and for our kids, but has been in touch with the Buffalo Public School District and trying to get this type of reform done within our district. And it's needed. We don't have any representation on the executive committee, which is unheard of, and for the amount of money that we're paying, and it's not just a money scenario to me, it's an equality thing for our kids, because for decades they've been looked over and shamed against, and they go through out of district play in our sports. So it's something that has to be addressed, and I support this resolution, and I hope the other board members support it also. As we see here, it seems like may have a majority vote, or we'll have all board members voting to support this resolution. And as we move forward, anything that we can do, or I can do personally, that we can help you, Mr. Kuzma, and get in this place. Our doors are open to the Section 6. We know that there's pieces of the Section 6 that wants the inclusion, and there's members of the Section 6 that do like the city of Buffalo and do love our kids also, and that's been willing to help, guide us and move us forward. So we just want to keep on working with those people and help trying to get some resolution about the executive committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. What I will do is put a draft together and get that to the board members either tomorrow or Friday morning. And if anybody else wishes to join President Belton-Cotman as the sponsor of that resolution, let me know, and I'll make sure the name is added prior to the board meeting. And I also appreciate you, Mr. Hurd, not to deliberate too much more on this, but I appreciate you saying that this is not just about the money. This is about the principle of it, and having a seat at the table and a say in the critical decisions that are made on behalf of our student athletes. And that's, for me, the primary reason why I'm making this suggestion. I think enough is enough. And the fact that the committee is set up the way that it is, as I said, appalling in this day and age. So thank you for that. On the next two topics, I wanted to update the board just briefly on behalf of Dr. Cash. First, in regard to the combined swimming program, which is a program that runs during the winter, usually for female student athletes. I think it takes place at City Honors. It may be a little bit more inclusive of including some students from other school buildings. There was an email that went out from the athletic department, which I'm sure many of you have heard about from your constituents. And I'm here to inform you that right now we're going to put a pause on that particular decision. Dr. Cash is out of town right now, but I have spoken with him about it. And we will revisit that decision. Certainly our goal as a school district is to build on programs that are working, not to dismantle them or take them apart. And so when Dr. Cash returns, we will review that situation and come back to the board with the recommendation. But at this point, the decision to cancel that particular combined swimming program is on pause, and we will revisit that, okay? And make sure that we make the right decision for kids, and certainly expand upon our, what works in this district, and certainly make it equitable and maybe more inclusive, and expand upon something that is working, which I think is the goal of equity. Secondly, in regard to modified sports, I think there was some concern that there was not mention on the correspondence that went out. There was not a mention of modified sports. And the reason for that is it's not because the district does not intend to have a modified sports program next year. It does. And it tends to have a robust modified sports program and to continue to build on the modified sports program that we do have in the coming years. It wasn't included in that correspondence because modified sports is not part of Section 6. It's not aligned with Section 6. And so the email that was sent out was in regard to Section 6 sports. And so Dr. Cash, the next time he's able to brief you on that, will present to the board on his recommendation and plans for the modified sports program. And so I wanted, as board members, inquiries, concerns about modified sports, I wanted you to know the plan is to have a robust modified sports program, and that will be presented at a later date. It just wasn't included because of that. The intent was to send information regarding Section 6 sports. Okay? So I appreciate your time, Mr. Hurd. I think I took a little more than 5 minutes, but I think you had a few things knocked off. So I do appreciate the time tonight, sir, and the late notice and your willingness to accommodate me to speak on these important topics.
Anytime, Mr. Kuzma. I believe we have a hand raised that might have a question about, point 2 and point 3 of your presentation this evening. So we have President Sharon Belton-Cotman. Mrs. President.
Okay, so I just need Nate to do a point of clarity in regards to the board committee meetings, and I need Nate to provide for the board the guidelines that were drafted by the previous board in regards to the committee guidelines and how they will be conducted and for what time periods they would be conducted. A correspondent was sent out today by Mr. Hurd, who said that I was responsible for limiting the board to 1 hour. In addition to that, Mr. Kuzma, the record will reflect that Dr. Nevergo, Teresa Tiggs, and myself voted to continue a 2-hour meeting for our committees, and it was voted down. So I appreciate when board members put things in writing, that they do their due diligence and make sure that it's correct. But I understand that board members have not always been at the table when these decisions were made. So I would just appreciate if our council would send out those guidelines so that board members will know what they're talking about when they put it in an email, and that we make sure that there's no confusion with things that are being said, okay? And I think that's very important, that when board members speak, that we speak from our point of truth, our truth, not from making up things. And it's very important that we represent our board properly. And that's what my concern is, that the policies are there for everyone to read, and that if there's any questions about things, that Nate Kuzman is there to make clarity of it. I think that's important. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get that out by tomorrow, Board President.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the comments from the president of the board. And next, I will move on. And I believe that we should have a conversation about that, but not over the district's time. Next, I would like to move forward with the second part of our presentation. And this is a happier time that we like to talk about. And I'm gonna bring in Dr. Tanja Williams, who actually championed this and brought it to our attention that what week this is. And we continue on with the celebration. And I'm gonna let Dr. Tanja Williams present it. Thank you. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. Admir, if you could put up the presentation. While he's doing that, I want to say good evening to everyone, board members, Dr. Brown Hall, and colleagues, and any family or students that may also be watching. Tonight, the Division of Student Support Services, a huge focus for everything that we do, focuses around wellness. And certainly tonight, I have a wonderful team with me that's going to be talking about a project that the district received grant funding for. It's called Project Aware. And it right now is being implemented at Burgard High School. And we have with us our principal, Ms. Charlene Watson, who is doing some phenomenal work over at Burgard in leading this piece. We have with us tonight our esteemed Dr. Laura Ficara, who is from the Office of Mental Health with the New York State Department. We have Ms. Arlene Adams, who really is the point person who oversees a lot of the day-to-day work for Project Aware. And we have with us Andrea Sanders, and you're going to hear some of the things that she does with our crisis team, who stays busy. So we're going to do a lot of talk about mental health awareness because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And, you know, it's a good time for us to pause and think about the fact that, you know, persons with mental health issues are certainly deserving of care and understanding, compassion, and with pathways to healing. And most all of us have been touched in some way, shape, or form, whether it is personally or if it is family members, neighbors, friends, with someone who has suffered from mental health issues. You know, it's one of those things that's kind of an equal opportunity illness. You don't have to be born with it. You know, it knows no favoritism when it comes to gender or race or ethnicity. Any of us, if you have not been touched by mental health issues, keep living. And certainly at some point, you will in some way, shape, or form likely, you know, have, whether again, it's family, friends, or someone in your immediate, you know, life that has suffered through mental health issues. We have a significant number of our students. This has been a very, very difficult year that our students and families have gone through, that we've all gone through. So we know that, you know, this is timely. You know, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things at Burgard that they're doing to, you know, increase awareness and those kinds of things. And so before we get into that, you know, again, my division really focuses on wellness, certainly mental health wellness, but we also focus on physical wellness. Admir, if you could advance to the next slide. This week is Nurses Appreciation Week. It began on May 6th and it ends on May 12th, though we will continue to celebrate the great work that our school nurses do. They have all answered the call of duty, which they always do, but over this last year, they have really gone above and beyond. And when we say we're celebrating our nurses, I want to include in this, we're including nurse practitioners, we have nurse supervisors, we have registered nurses, we have licensed practical nurses, medical assistants, and medical social workers, and they are just wonderful. They are hired by our partners at Supplemental Healthcare Agency and Sunbelt. And I'm telling you, these are organizations that over this last year, you know, through the challenges that we've had, we have asked many times for them to do things differently than they usually have. I've been a school principal. I know how busy a nurse's office can be. And so our nurses already had full-time jobs when our pandemic hit, and we kept asking for more and more. Can they take temperature readings? You know, can they do testing? You know, now we're looking at getting vaccinations done. And I just want to share with you, and it's the truth, that everything that we have asked of our partners, we've never heard no. You know, we just continue to hear from them. Let's see how we can do whatever is being asked for. These nurses have been on the front lines, you know, when the pandemic first hit, handing out meals, taking temperatures at our food sites. And we just want to let them know that we really, really appreciate all that they do. And so this certificate is for all of our school nurses. I'm going to turn things over to Elena. She's going to continue with how we have shown appreciation for our nurses this week.
This is just a typical Buffalo Public School story about how teamwork makes the dream work. But Dr. Cash wanted to do something special for our nurses. And so I don't know if you all know this, but we've got the second largest teaching greenhouse in New York State, next to Cornell University only. So I called Dan Robillard, who teaches horticulture at McKinley High School, where our greenhouse is. It's made up of gen ed and differentiated students, getting them ready for college and careers. They do a lot of wonderful things. They do weddings. They do the mayor's Christmas tree every year. They do planters, make corsages. And I said to Dan, is there something we can do for our nurses? Can you make up 70 plants for me, for us to
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Excuse me. While you're talking, can we please have the screen switch to the speaker while they're presenting?
Actually, there's a wonderful slide of our nurses that I would love Admir to put up.
I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hurd. Don't know where those nurses are. There they are. There's 4 of our nurses, 4 of our 70. Aren't they wonderful? So Dan Robillard said no problem. He had the students make up pots for the nurses. He walked over to the McKinley graphics department. He said, can you make me spikes for this special occasion? So all those little spikes are in the shape of nurses' hats, and they say, Happy National School Nurses Day. On top of that, there was a logistics question. How do we get these 70 plants to all of our wonderful nurses to show them how much we appreciate them? At that point, I called Jermaine Booker at the service center, told him what I needed to do. He said, no problem. This morning, 4 vehicles went out, loaded up all the plants, and delivered them to all of our nurses, because we want them to know how much they're appreciated each and every day, not just National School Nurses Day.
Yes.
That's the conclusion of my little story about how teamwork makes the dream work.
And it's a wonderful story. Thank you, Elena. Again, we just appreciate our nurses so much. We are going to transition now to hearing from the team at Burgard, from our phenomenal principal, Ms. Charlene Watson. Admir, if you can switch back and go to slide number 3. And we're going to start to hear about some of the work that I believe our Burgard Bulldogs have been involved in. Ms. Watson?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Dr. Williams. And I, of course, could not do this work without my wonderful, wonderful team, my assistant principals, Andrew Druin, Eric Johnson, Tracy Travis. When we say teamwork makes the dream work, it is absolutely true. And once Mrs. Adams came on as our project administrator for the Project Aware grant, I actually breathed a sigh of relief. First of all, we want to refer to our education bargain with students and parents. And I want to quick give you a snapshot of Burgard High School for those of you who may not know. Burgard High School is at 400 Kensington Avenue in the heart of Central Park. And we have approximately 478 students, primarily African Americans. And we actually, as a result of our grant, were able to hire not only Mrs. Adams, but a 3rd social worker and a community education leader, Toya Carr, and Lawrence Jones is our social worker. Dr. Cash has always given me an extra social worker, an African-American male social worker, Solomon Jackson, in addition to Tina McCrae, and they kind of divide up the building because I've always approached my work with the divide and conquer process. The grant came about as a result of our youth risk behavior survey results a few years back. And when Dr. Williams first approached me about it, I can't remember who called first, Dr. Brown Hall or Dr. Tandra Williams. I thought, what does mental health have to do with schoolwork?
But then as I started thinking about some of our discipline referrals and thinking about some of our issues we've had with students, and I do recall President Cotman being in our building one day when a young man became upset and punched a glass in the main office. Do you remember that, President Cotman? So at any rate, I started thinking about it and making the connection that some of our youth are really troubled and could use extra support more than we can give in the course of the day. So after we submitted our paperwork, we were approved for the grant. Also, President Cotman sat in on our meetings when we initially started to get the ball rolling and get things off the ground. But once Arlene Adams joined us, we picked up momentum and the monies came forward, and I'm going to let her go on with our next part of our slide presentation.
Ashley Swanson, I'm actually going to defer to Dr. Laura Ficara in this next one. If we could have the next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight and to really highlight some of the amazing work happening at Burgard High School. Truly, Dr. Williams, Ms. Watson, Arlene Adams, we have a bunch of visionaries amongst us, and it is an honor to be part of that team. So in my role at the New York State Office of Mental Health, I support Mrs. Adams with Project Aware. Project Aware is a federally funded grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, otherwise known as SAMHSA. It's a 5-year grant that spans 2018 to 2023. And really the overarching goal of Project Aware from a federal perspective is to build the capacity of schools to address the mental health considerations that students, staff, parents, and community members have. I have a coordinator partner at the New York State Education Department as well. The project is evaluated by an external third-party company, Brockport Research Institute. Each of the participating districts have a funded community project manager. So for Buffalo, it is Mrs. Arlene Adams, and the district has developed an advisory council. But when we say teamwork makes the dream work, that is absolutely the case. So that just touches the surface of stakeholders that are involved with Project Aware and benefit from Project Aware. If we delve a little bit deeper, there's also district administrators, building administration, family, community, faith-based organizations, teachers, staff, students, your contracts office, purchasing, your multi-tiered system of support teams, vendors, consultants, service providers. Quite literally, addressing mental health is something that can't be done in isolation, that we need to do together. And in fact, recently, the State Education Department and the Office of Mental Health released a joint memo really reminding us all of the importance of addressing mental health, and by way of wellness, to have a plan related to social emotional learning, and also to have a plan with topics such as talking about suicide prevention and postvention, and what are some of the upstream prevention programming and early intervention techniques that we can use as part of a tiered structure. Admir, next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to pose the question to the board. What is mental health? And this is something that, you know, if we weren't necessarily counting the minutes, honestly, the definition of mental health, if we were to solicit these out, would likely be as different as, what does it mean to be aggressive? What does it mean for a toddler to have a tantrum? right? What does it mean? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And so when we talk about health, we are talking about a topic that affects all 478 students at Burgard, every teacher in the building, every parent, every caregiver, every community member, you all, myself. And the reason I'm so confident in saying that is that we all have mental health. Mental health is a topic that really takes into account the continuum that people experience. With the 2018 requirement for schools K-12 to address mental health literacy from a wellness perspective, mental health has been defined in this law as ensuring that students recognize the multiple dimensions of health by including mental health and the relationship of physical health and mental health so as to enhance student understanding, attitudes, and behavior that promote health, well-being, and human dignity. So when we are talking about mental health, we are literally talking about everyone. Mental health is a continuum of wellness to illness, right? But many times when people hear the term mental health, we can sometimes go to a place where we're thinking of the DSM-5. What's the diagnosis, right? What's the quote-unquote condition? Though I think I'm in good company when I reflect in the events over the past year, that no one has to have a mental illness to be particularly stressed and concerned by the events and during the events over the last year and more. So as we think about mental health as being something we all have, just functions on a continuum, addressing mental health in schools requires a tiered perspective. The visual on the screen is the Interconnected Systems Framework, which really is the national gold standard for addressing mental health in schools from a tiered perspective. And if you happen to love multi-tiered system of support triangles, like PBIS, like RTI as much as I do, you can start to see in this visual, though it's a layered effect, you can start to see the tiered systems of support forming. When we address mental health literacy and social emotional learning and wellness, we're talking about tier 1 supports for each and every student, each and every teacher, everyone the school building serves in its catchment area. Tier 2 supports, we are talking about early intervention. At Burgard specifically, Mrs. Adams and her team have implemented a Check and Connect program. And at Tier 3, we are talking about the supports and services that social workers or a community-based organization may render. Admir, can I have you advance the visual? Thank you so much. So what does it mean to, quote unquote, do mental health in schools? Well, in order to address mental health from this multi-tiered perspective, we do need Mental Health Awareness Month and Children's Mental Health Awareness Week, absolutely. But as we'll reflect on, this work happens each and every day, much like Ellen has said about the nurses. Addressing mental health is something that we do, again, for all students. So what this takes at a school level is support. And not only financial support, but capacity and building the capacity of personnel. Quite literally, human capital, resources. We need training components. We need collaboration with family and community members, needs and resource mapping. Much of this has been already started, as Dr. Williams and Ms. Watson reflected in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey results that really targeted Burgard as a great microcosm, a pilot, if you will, for the work of Project Aware. mental health screening, evidence-based practices, data, and funding, right? So it is all of these become the stars that align in and beyond the month of May. Admir, would you advance the slide, please? Thank you so much. So being a teacher by trade, why would I suggest that a topic like mental health be part of what a school board considers? First and foremost, again, everyone has mental health. Secondly, if you love research like I do, research suggests that self-regulation is the most prominent indicator, not one of the most prominent indicator of future success based on student outcomes. Blows reading scores out of the water. Not to say reading scores aren't important. Self-regulation, #1 indicator of student success. The graphic before you highlights the relationship between mental health and academics from the standpoint that mental health addresses the social emotional learning components that allow students to self-regulate, to attend, quite literally, to be there, to show up, to have instruction be planted on fertile ground, if you would. Addressing mental health also impacts friendships and behavior. It addresses graduation rates as well as post-secondary endeavors. So what we see is that when we address mental health, we are impacting academics as well, and we are addressing the risk and protective factors at the individual and peer level, family level, community level, and school level. And what I'd like to do now, Amir, if you would advance the slides once more, I would like to pass the baton over to Mrs. Adams. If you would please highlight some of the amazing progress that the team at Burgard has had with Project AWARE in doing all this. AWARE being an acronym for Advancing Wellness and Resilience in Education, and it's worth investing in. Mrs. Adams.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Fakara.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to ask you to advance, and then I'm going to come back to this. So the teacher in me, my teacher heart, always says, when we think about the things that we do to be physically healthy, we can list off a number of things, eating better, exercising, things like that. When we think about mental health, usually the default is we go straight to anxiety, depression, suicide, to the actual illness, when in fact, mental health is coping skills, is knowing what your triggers are, is knowing how to identify those things so that you know how to address them. So when we talk about mental health, again, we're talking about absolutely everyone. And when we're talking about mental illness, we're talking about a result of an actual illness. So Project AWARE, really, I'm so excited about it. It is groundbreaking in the Buffalo Public Schools. My hope is that Burgard is really the blueprint for what will be in every Buffalo Public school, and especially in high schools. We see some mindfulness rooms in elementary schools, but the one that we will open at Burgard will be the first one in a high school setting. So Project AWARE has 4 main goals that the focus is on. The first one being training, the second, increased screening, referral, and connection to services, the third, parent, family, community engagement, and the last piece, which I think is so important, is sustainability, because grants come in and they go out, and the principles that come with them leave with them. And that is the last thing that we want to have happen here. Again, with teamwork making the dream work, we are affectionately known by New York State Ed as the trifecta. You have myself as the project administrator, you have Lawrence Jones, who is the social worker, and Toya Carr as the community resource leader. Next slide, please. So part of that training is mental health first aid. In year 1, We had 13 participants that were trained. Year 2, which was last year, I was hired midway through, 47. And this year we've held our first training, which is 18 participants. So over 86% of the faculty and staff at Burgard, along with community members, have been trained in mental health first aid. And just as, you know, we respond to a crisis, a health crisis with CPR, or calling the ambulance or triaging, mental health first aid helps us to be first responders to those that may have a mental health crisis. So we were on the news a couple weeks ago on AM Buffalo. Compere is our partner that provides that training, and so they invited us to be on the news. So some of you may have saw us there. Next slide, please. These are our community partners that we have now at Burgard High School. When we came in, there were maybe about 3 or 4 of them that were existing, but as we find certain needs gaps, we find these community partners that come on board. They sit on our advisory council as well, so that we don't do this process alone. But if families are in need of Medicare, we have Fidelis, we have Univera. If they're in need of mentoring, we have Breaking Barriers. ECMC is directly across the street, and if students are having a mental health crisis and we need to have that connect, they are there. Counseling services. There's just a plethora, peer-to-peer from mental health advocates of Western New York. Substance abuse from the Prevention Council, and the list goes on and on. So we appreciate these partners. Again, as a district, I really think that we need a comprehensive approach to how we get our community partners, but definitely like a Rolodex so that it could be available for the different school needs. Next slide, please. To go back one. We held a back to school drive. This was actually the brainchild of our community resource leader who, in the time of when COVID first struck, you know, we were kind of scrambling and everyone didn't know what to do. And when the kids were getting ready to come back, AP Johnson said, well, what can we do to show them strength? And so our initial logo is in the middle there, where we put that cape on, which is really what we had to do for our students and our families and for the community. And we held this drive-through backpack drive, and we made very good use of the garages that are in the back of Burgard High School. We had 214 student attendees come out. We actually had more, but they weren't students of Burgard High School. We had tech assistants there, because the students were having a hard time with the computers and logging on. We helped parents sign up for Parent Portal. We had the Census Bureau there because they were having a difficult time reaching parents and families. And we were able to distribute supplies, information, paper copies of student curriculum for those having technical difficulties. And this was truly, truly a wonderful event. We will host this again this year, and we were recognized by State Ed for it. Next slide, please. The biggest piece for me with this grant, again, is sustainability. And through this grant, we are able to get trained to be mental health first aid trainers ourselves in the district. So it is scheduled for June 15th to the 17th. The National Council for Behavioral Health is the sole source provider for this training. So when it is complete, we will have 16 people who are trained, comprised of district employees, parent reps, student rep, and we will be able to turnkey that training to the district, where we will need your support, of course, because again, we can't move it forward past this grant. So sustainability and putting mental health on the forefront is why we wanted to present to you now all the good works that we are doing. For trainings, we are doing mental health first aid youth was our first line of training because it deals directly with the young people that we work with. We're also moving on to mental health first aid adult. What happens when a parent is in crisis, or our coworkers, or any adult within our community? And then we were also written into the grants for Compere for teen mental health. where they actually integrate mental health awareness within the curriculum. And I think the thing that piqued my interest about Project Aware and what I want this board to understand as I come before you is that we cry different in the hood. And I say that every time. So where Ms. Watson referenced that one young man that punched the glass, that is his manifestation. His symptom may look different than they look for other people, but it's a manifestation of trauma nevertheless. And our students, particularly in this district, suffer a lot. You have homicides. You know, Kanisha was referenced earlier, but that was her twin sister. Her twin sister attends Burgard. And so the families are left to pick up the pieces of the trauma that we suffer in our community. So it's so important that while we're looking at whole school, whole community, whole child, that we factor in their mental health as well. And the last piece of this is the Wellness Center. And literally we're rolling up our sleeves and unpacking the boxes. And the Wellness Center at Burgard will be comprised of 3 rooms, one being a mindfulness room, a parent center that's going to model the parent centers that are around the district, and lastly, a counseling suite where our community partners will be able to provide counseling in a confidential space for our students. Next slide, please. So the first picture on the left there is what the room looked like previously and what it's looking now, or how the kids would say how it started versus how it's going. And so slowly we are putting this room together. This room was inspired by the students. Honestly, the students who were in school suspension is who I pulled out. We looked at the data for the frequent offenders, and I had them tell me if we could make a room that was opposite of that room, what would that room include? And so they told me, you know, an area where I could calm down. Some of them, the focus was art. Some of them, the focus was music. Some wanted board games and manipulatives. And so we really built this room based on student input. And they inspired it, and ultimately they will pick a name for it, whether it's called a prevention room or a respite room, or they're already starting to think of some ideas, the students who are sitting on the Tier 1 team. And so, again, inspired by them. It will be used for a variety of things. Our advisory council mentioned streaming some of the activities we do in that room district-wide, using it as a part of treatment plan for students who are on medication and may need some time for that medication to kick in, and just a whole lot of other things that we can do in there. So we're very excited about this space. Next slide, please. We have a Mental Health and Wellness Day coming up on May 26th. We do have a guest speaker, Dr. Broderick Sawyer. He's a clinical psychologist specializing in race-based stress and trauma, mindfulness, and compassion. We're also going to have a peer-to-peer presentation from Buffalo Public High School students that will be streamed virtually, presented by the Mental Health Advocates of Western New York, along with physical activities, healthy eating, and more. Next slide, please. And so beyond Project Aware, again, we are in year 3 of this grant. It actually ends in a couple years. So even though it's year 3 for us, it really feels like year 1, because this is the first year that myself and the team are in here. And going forward, really, what we realize is unless the MTSS systems are actually in place, it makes it very difficult to get to that tier 3 level, which addresses those who do have mental health illnesses or issues and needs to be referred to community-based agencies. We definitely need more counselors that are specifically dedicated to mental health, and definitely more community services. And also, it would just be my hope that mental health first aid would actually become a district-wide training, that everyone who touches our young people's lives would at least have a preliminary backing on what it's like to respond to a mental health crisis. And up top, I actually have my favorite picture when I was an instructional coach at Burgard years ago, where we went to the inauguration of Barack Obama. And so I am vested in Burgard High School. It's where I spent some of my best educational career years. And I really do want this to be a model for what should be in all Buffalo public schools. Next slide. I will now turn it over to Andrea Sanders. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Sanders. I am Supervisor for Student Support Services. I supervise the Crisis Prevention and Response Team for Buffalo Schools. The first slide is just a meet the team. I supervise 4 staff members. There's 3 social workers, and Monica Sardo is a psychologist on our team. And there is 1 vacant position. Currently, they are spread out throughout the district. Each has a separate zone. Each zone has approximately 13 schools, be it elementary and high school, that they supervise. They connect with the school administrators as well as the SST teams to provide services. We're not just a crisis response team, we're prevention. So we do a lot of preventive work with the schools, be it identifying trainings that are needed for our SSTs and for our buildings, and providing trainings for not only the SSTs, but for school staff, as well as students and even parents through the Office of Parent and Family Engagement. We can go to the next slide, please. So these are just several of the trainings that we do have available for our staff, for our students, and again, for our parents. All of our SST members have been thoroughly trained in the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale for schools. And this is an assessment for students when they are in crisis to determine if they are at risk of harming themselves or others. And then there is a protocol as to what happens next. And I'll show you that protocol briefly in a later slide. But what happens next? During the COVID pause, we developed a way to come up with a virtual way to responding with students. We had a lot of students that were reaching out to SSTs or to teachers because they were a little overwhelmed and teachers weren't exactly aware on how to support. So we developed a protocol on, and you can actually go to the next slide, I'm sorry. We developed a protocol on what that process would look like, identifying who in the school building needed to be contacted, giving them specifics on what that contact would look like, if it was going to be a telephone call or an email, and then what the next step would be, what parties would be involved, how would they share that information, ensuring that they had the ability to contact parents as well to of the concern. We're not expecting our teachers to be professionals in addressing mental health issues, but just being able to implement that warm handoff, making sure that they're able to direct the students into the right path and make that connection for them, whether it be a connection with the school personnel, our mental health service providers, or the SSTs, or community resource. Each teacher or each staff member was also provided with a list of resources that they could share with parents as well as the students, like crisis services, the CARES program, so that they will be able to reach out. Okay, the next slide, please. So this is, and I know it's kind of small, but this is our protocol, and it just gives a clarification on what happens with this when a student is in crisis, what happens if it's during the school day, what happens if it's after school, and as I just covered, what happens if it's happening during virtual times. And even during the virtual times, it's like in the evening. Some teachers were getting, emails at 10 o'clock at night because they're still checking their email, and they needed to just know what can they do next. You don't want to just, have that email go unnoticed or unaddressed, but they weren't sure, what do I do? And just being able to give them that clear visual on what takes place next. Our goal is to be able to train all district personnel in suicide safety for school staff. It just gives them the the education or the knowledge on how to respond to a situation, what the resources are, what our protocol is in our district, and how they should move forward. The crisis team has worked tirelessly with the other components of the student support services in developing social emotional lessons and developing lesson plans even for this month for Mental Health Awareness Month, and also developing trainings that we identify as necessary for the school. So once we see a need within the district, we find what those trainings are that are best practices. We take those trainings and then we turnkey them to the school staff. And that's all I have. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. So I want to thank the team for what I think hopefully is a robust presentation, and which helps all of our board members and colleagues to know that, you know, the Division of Student Support Services certainly focuses on wellness. You know, it's a shift from just thinking about mental health as just, you know, an illness. We focus on mental wellness. And, you know, we are moving forward at a rapid pace. We're constantly peeling layers and going deeper and doing everything that we can to help our students. Our work doesn't stop. You know, at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, you heard Mrs. Sanders talk about emails and phone calls that all of us get, you know, in the evening from principals when things are happening, and we respond. And so, you know, I want to thank the team, and at this time, we will address any questions that you have.
Thank you, Dr. Tanja Williams, and everyone. At this time, as Dr. Williams said, if anybody have any questions concerning one, Nurture Appreciation Week, or any comments or reflections, or Mental Health Awareness Week, please go ahead now, and then we can address it in order. I do see a hand raised. President Kottman, your hand was raised first. Are you going to reflect at this time?
First of all, thank you, Burgard Strong, for your presentation. Dr. Tanja Williams, I see your footprint in this. I noticed that the procedures are written down, they're put in place. That's huge. I appreciate the fact that under your leadership, you are making sure that your departments document and put procedures in place so that people can know what to do. And I see that that's new in our district, and I just want to thank you for that. Principal Watson, yeah, that's right. She deserves that. Okay. Principal Watson, I didn't want to leave you hanging. I couldn't get my mute button off. But if you know how I work, once I'm comfortable with something, I move on to the next thing. And the most important thing to me was to make sure that when we first started out with this aware, that everything was being done well, and I was pleased with that. I tried to get on, I think it was yesterday, but so much went on yesterday that I just couldn't break in to hear your meeting for this month. But I appreciate that your staff continues to invite me, and I will come back. I wanted to say that when this first was rolled out, I wanted to figure out immediately how to get it throughout the entire district, okay? And so we may have that opportunity coming up if smart minds are working in regards to the funds that are coming to our district, and we will be able to do more. But one of the things that kept resounding in my mind is the question, what is being done for the adults? What's happening for the adults? Because to think that the mental health issue just exists for the children, is not correct. And particularly after COVID, we realized that. So that was my question. What happens if you identify, this should be a two-way street. Children should be able to identify adults in need of help as well. So that's my question to you all. But I want to thank everyone. I appreciate the work that everyone is doing in this area. I have a question, and maybe I didn't get my answer from back in the summer. Was our money reinstated? because the money was taken away from us from last year. Did we get our money back, or did we get it through the back door with this new allotment? I'm not laughing. I'm serious. Did we get our money back, or because the year two, what happened, board, is that the state just basically came in and took the funds and said, that's it, we're taking our money back. And we were in our planning stage at that point, and we had just started to launch. And so I was just curious to know if we got any money back from the state. That's all. Two things, the adults and the money.
Okay.
Okay, I will respond to the adults portion. So again, we started with teen mental health first aid, but you're absolutely correct. So we actually have some students who are actually dealing with their parents who suffer from some mental health issues. We actually, you know, like Dr. Pucara says, there's everyone that has been touched or affected by this. But the immediate concern was the young people that we were working with, and now we are starting with mental health first aid adult, how to be able to identify those same signs and symptoms in adults. So our first training for that is being held on June 12th. For our teachers, while we are having the Mental Health Awareness Day, we are actually having someone come in to provide them with 8-minute massages as a part of teacher appreciation / mental health awareness, recognizing that this year has been difficult and teachers are amazing and we pivot right away, but this was really, really stressful. So just a way to say thank you, we acknowledge you, and we acknowledge the stress that you have endured during this time. We have a lot of the teachers were also excited and involved about the things that we are have happening, and so they're making a lot of suggestions to us as well. You know, to us as a team, as a part of that advisory council, and so again, we recognize that the reach does go beyond the young people to adults, and really to address everyone.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Fakara, are you able to weigh in about the funding?
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Yes, and President Kottman, thanks for bringing this to my attention again. I know it's something we've talked about in the past. I do have a response I can offer. However, I would beg the favor of the board just to note that it is the State Education Department that manages the fiscal piece of this grant. As the funds flow from SAMHSA at the federal level, they go directly to the State Education Department. However, what I can say about this grant, Project Aware, is that at the end of the federal fiscal year, which is end of September, the books are closed, so to speak. My understanding for year one is that because of I'll use the word kerfuffle, but we'll say difficulties in the process getting the monies from SAMHSA to New York State. The monies were offered sort of after the district closed its books on July 1st as the encumbrance state. And so my understanding is that the business office could not logistically accept the money for year one after that. And then certainly once the federal fiscal year closes at the end of September, that ceases to be an opportunity for that funding for that year. My understanding for year two funds is that the district has been paid in full. I know initially there was the 20% paused. My understanding is that the 80% was paid, and then that the pending 20% for year two has been paid. As Mrs. Adams said, we are in year 3 of the project somehow, year 3 of 5. And all indications at this point are that funds are on track for year 3. But when it comes to those year 1 funds, that is not an opportunity that we have remaining at this juncture in year 3. But I do need to highlight that once the money fell into place and Mrs. Adams came on board, there was so much progress in year 2. And that will just continue exponentially.
And I will add, Ms. Kaplan, that I guarantee that Since my hire, all of the money is being spent all the way down. We are leaving nothing on the table. And I'll also add in there for the adults that while we are getting that training of trainers, is so that parents even can be trained in that parent center as well. There'll be different workshops in there for the parents. So I can't speak to what happened prior to my hiring, but just know that after, everything is being spent down.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I am going to be looking to see in this budget that we're going to do in the next session where this money is, because currently right now, I don't know if I'm seeing it. So somebody's going to have to break it down when we get to the next session on where it is, because right now I'm looking at about two staff members less, and I need to see where this money is in this budget. So we'll talk more about that, but I'm just grateful that you guys are so committed to this. And Principal Watson, a lot of our board members really don't know what you offer at Burgard, since we had an opportunity for a college to come in and tell us everything they're offering. Can you give me your elevator speech on what's going on at Burgard as far as the career technical education that's going on in there? Why wouldn't we use our own board meeting to sell our school? Okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. At Burgard, we currently offer auto technology, machine tool technology, and welding technology. Alfred State is one of our partners. We also work with the Northland project because our students are able to go directly from Burgard High School to Northland facility, where they offer additional higher level training in welding and machine tool. As a matter of fact, yesterday, Northland came and they signed up about 70 students to start there after graduation. We've also started our Saturday academies back in March so that students had an opportunity to come in on Saturdays, either AM or PM, to get their hours in shop because of the COVID from last year. And our partnership with Alfred State, not to mention our differentiated students, they need those hours in the shop to meet graduation requirements. And initially, we had more students coming on Saturday than we did during the school week. So with our third and fourth phase in now, it's kind of balancing out. Our shop teachers also work with teachers at Alfred State to make sure the curriculum is college level, and we also have an advisory board for our 3 different shop areas.
Thank you. Thank you. And one of your goals is to strengthen the other side of your building. Isn't that right? And hopefully we'll be able to use some of these funds to strengthen the other side. Thank you for that advertisement. We need our listening audience to know that Burgard is strong and there's a lot going on up in there. Thank you for that. I appreciate you guys.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have questions from Dr. Ann Rivera, followed by Member at Large, Larry Scott.
Very much. I want to echo President Kottman's sentiments about this program. It's really, really impressive what you've done. I like the way in which that it's so comprehensive and there are so many wraparound supports put into place. I think the program's impressive enough that I wanted to ask, are there to expand this to other buildings, especially with the mental health first aid model?
We certainly would love to do that. The way that the program was targeted to Burgard was based on our YRBS data. And so once we receive, that data back, and it's all been disaggregated, if there are needs that are being shown at other buildings, I think with the funding, this money that we have in place, we certainly could look at implementing a program very similar.
Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing more about that in the future.
Yeah. And if I could also offer that the Student Support Services Office is doing a fantastic job of really being mindful about how to innovate for expansion. So there's a team of participants on the statewide learning collaborative related to SHAPE. SHAPE acronym for School Health and Performance Evaluation. And that really is a way to address the 8 dimensions of school, what would be required to address mental health from a school perspective efficaciously. So there is some discussion being held in that way during the Learning Collaborative.
That's good to hear, because as you said yourself, I mean, this is really the foundation of learning, is mental health and wellness. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. Next, we have Member at Large, Larry Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. I just want to first say that Principal Watson, if you remember, I visited Burgard just before the pandemic hit last year. And
I do remember.
Like President Belton-Cottman mentioned, Burgard is certainly strong. I was extremely impressed with the visit and the range of programming that's offered to the students there. I truly think this was a wonderful presentation that was given tonight. I am extremely impressed with all that was presented tonight. I attended as did many other board members, the New York State School Boards Association annual conference last year, and one of the workshops I attended was the mental health first aid training that I think Hamburg School District actually presented on. Was very impressed with it then. I spoke about it here for an update at the board table. So I'm very excited to hear that we're actually implementing that here in Buffalo. The program seems very multifaceted, seems to be addressing the whole child. That one slide that you put up with all the agencies and groups and organizations and supports that are being implemented, that really was impressive to see the range of services being provided to our students and families. The crisis team, I want to recognize them and thank them for all they do. I gave you a shout out last business meeting that we had after the latest crisis. As a mental health professional in schools, you know, this work is close to my heart, and those are the toughest times, dealing with those crises that we have to deal with. So give you a lot of credit. I have a question, I'm getting there, but the one thing I really want to lift up, and Dr. Ann Rivera mentioned this is a program that sounds like is running well. We know how to do it, we're implementing it, it's getting results. And for me personally, as one board member, mental health, social emotional wellness is a top priority, followed closely by reading teachers and art and music. But we need to sustain this, we need to build on it, we need to replicate it. So I strongly support any effort to sustain it and build it and expand it across this district, because this is really what we need to do. It's happening, it's working, and we need to build on this work, in my opinion. My one question, you mentioned the Wellness Day with the guest speaker. Can you provide us information on that, details, and whether board members could attend that as guests? I understand if not because of COVID, but I am very interested in attending that event if I can. And the other actually 2 questions. Can you share the presentation with us all tonight?
Yes, absolutely can share the presentation. And yes, so Dr. Broderick Sawyer is going to speak from 11 to 12 on the 26th. And we were so excited, Dr. Fakara actually connected us with that Technical Assistance Center. So they're going to set it up so that we can actually stream that district-wide and for the community. So that information will be forthcoming. But just in case, you know, some other schools did not or were not able to plan a mental health awareness day, they can share in on ours. So that information will be coming. I will definitely send it on up through the chains, and Elena can send it out.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you all for presenting tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Hurd. That concludes my comments and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, and great questions. I don't see any more hands raised at this time, so I would like to go forward just by saying, first of all, thank you, Dr. Chandra Williams, for such a great presentation and helping put this together, because mental health, I believe, is the most important role that this district faces today, and dealing with our children, our teachers, even our nurses. Everybody's said the exact same things and stresses, through the COVID and even pre-COVID. So the mental health issues is very prevalent right now in all our children, all our students, and I like what you do over at Burgard, and other schools follow suit also, and having rooms set aside where a child can wind down, where a child can reflect, their attitude and try to come to some type of reason, why they acting that way, or what's the cause of their irrational behaviors, and maybe we can come to conclusions, try to help solve those instead of just disciplining the child. I'd like to thank Mrs. Calla for her participation and helping with the flower and plants program for our nurses. So hats off to all our nurses in our district. Thank you so much. I'd like to give you a applaud myself for the work that you do. Now just know that my mother is a retired nurse. I dearly know a lot of nurses because she had a lot of friends that were nurses. And one thing they do is wear their uniforms all the time. And you can walk in the streets, you can actually see nurses, identify them, and every day, because, they wear that tag with them. And I appreciate each and every one of you that's working with our children, that's working, for us in our community. Also, Mrs. Fakara, for your work that you're doing with Project Aware. Project Aware is advancing wellness and resiliency in education, I believe you said. And the work that you're doing over there at the school is phenomenal. And dealing with the SAMHSA grant and making sure that's been highly effective, and all the things that we're hearing today and the tools and how it's working over at Burgard with our children. I believe every dime is very well spent, and thank you so much for your contribution. Also, Mrs. Adams, for your role in training our staff and making sure everybody's up to date. And also, she mentioned training teachers. And one thing that the slide did talk about was mental hygiene. And I would like to say that I read an article, I think it was out of Chicago, where children were dropping out of school because of mental hygiene. And they was getting low performing grades because of their living conditions and those type of stresses. So even just paying attention to little things that a child may be going through, or a student, is very helpful, in helping them in their future and curing them, of different things. So all these things are very important. And that's one of my questions about the mental hygiene. What is the district role and plan, for kids, that does have hygiene problems, or that also leads to other mental capabilities? So what does the district do for those type of children? So the question would be for the kids that have hygiene issues, and that was one of the things that was on the slide. What is the district perspective? Are they helping children with washing clothes or new clothes, or are there allowances for monies for the families? Could you just give us some reflection on that?
Well, I can speak for Burgard. We have a clothes closet that our social worker oversees, and we are able to provide students with clean clothes. And actually, she just asked for more donations last month. And if they need to shower at the school, we have supplies that they can shower at the school if need be. We offer trips to the hairdresser, to the barber shop, whatever it is we can do to, just help students feel good about themselves.
Okay.
And I would say that most schools, again, I'm a former principal, most schools do address in a very supportive and discreet way students that may be experiencing hygiene issues.
Okay. Because that was said in the article that was one of the major reasons why children do drop out, and because they're ashamed or afraid to be around other children. And if that's an issue that we can solve, I think that'd be quite not a simple one, but a challenging one, but something that, that can be worked on in helping those students. Also, thank you, Ms. Sanders, with your work with suicide prevention. I know that there's a lot more work in the future that's going on, and please keep us abreast of anything we can do or I can do personally to come and help. Definitely will. All our programs, sponsors like Breaking Barriers and Univera, I know that we have a lot of sponsors, too many to name right now, but thank you for their help also in working with our health and wellness in our district. Also, thank you, Mrs. Watson. We go back and remember back when you was teaching, you showed that same passion as a teacher that you do as a principal. So thank you for looking at our students. I remember over at Seneca, all the female students went to you and they came and gathered around you because
absolutely
you were that one.
Still do. They still do.
They could talk to as a mother, as a sister. And I see that reflecting right now in your work as a principal. So thank you for your work over there. And also, remember a couple of years ago, I remember I was working General Motors, and we brought a General Motors auto show over to Burgard High School. And
yes.
I would like to talk to you to try to resume that because we had executives we flew in from California that came over from Cadillac and Chevrolet. And
that was a great program. You have to talk to Rob Harris and see what happened with that. I'm not sure, what happened, but that was a great program.
We had some changeover at General Motors, Tonawanda, and some fundings got transferred to other departments and things like that. So, but let's work on that to see if we can reenact that program and
absolutely
for the children.
Okay.
With that, I'd like to say thank you once again to everyone, and I'd like to conclude today's Educational Support Committee meeting, and we'll move on over to the Student Achievement. Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown will be supervising Student Achievement. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for coming out and giving such a great presentation. And please don't forget in the emails, leave contact information so that we can help in any way that we can.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. And thank you everyone that presented. We appreciate it greatly. So now it is Dr. Evans-Brown, Student Achievement meeting. You can take it from here, Dr. Evans-Brown, and then we'll transfer it over to Finance.
All right, sounds good. This is Student Achievement section. In lieu of an actual student achievement, this is a continuation of the 21-22 budget discussion. And with that, I will move it to Mr. Pritchett.
And before you do, give me one moment. Dr. Evans-Brown, there was an item that I did email the board about. The special ed presentation will be moved to June, but earlier today I did send those answers to the special ed questions that were sent by Dr. Rivera for the entire board. So all board members should have that now. All right?
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to look at it, but I did see it.
Yeah. It was close to meeting time. I understand completely. So thank you very much, Dr. Evans-Brown, for allowing this time to be used to support the budget discussions, because there probably is leftover discussion from last week that board members who have actually had additional time to review the newer documents, the updated documents that Jeff sent out, they probably have questions this evening. So we will allow board member Paulette Woods to reconvene and head this part up. And then Jeff Pritchard is here. Welcome back, Jeff. We appreciate you spending time with us this evening and answering board members' questions about the budget. But I will also let you know that all cabinet members are here also to support any questions you might have, because we want to show you that we also, and Dr. Cash, support the entire budget process and are here to answer any questions board members may have. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Woods, and then she can work with Jeff.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown, for relinquishing your time so that we can carry on with a very important major process or problem we have to address. We have to pass a budget. We just had a great presentation on some of the wonderful programs that Buffalo Public Schools funds, and every program that the school operates has to be included in our budget. I just want to give some opening remarks that The 2021-22 budget is prepared by the superintendent and the administrative staff, and the assumptions that are contained in the operating plan, whether it is new programs, COVID programs to address COVID learning loss, or the level of operations of Buffalo schools, whether it's 2 days a week or 5 days a week, or whether how many number of children will be coming back to school in person. These are assumptions that are included in the budget, and it is the superintendent's budget, draft budget, that is being submitted to the board. So let's see. I have asked, and we have our illustrious CFO here. Thank you, Jeff, for being here. And I had asked them, Dr. Cash and Jeff, to please spell out what assumptions are included in the budget plan, since funding follows programs. You have to put the money onto the programs that you're going to enact. And we are all aware that the 2021-22 budget clearly indicates $72,262,131 increase in our New York State funding, basic formula aid. And the community has very high expectations of this board and Buffalo Public Schools, that we are going to be implementing improvements, expanded services, and we're just going to do a wonderful job. So I'm hoping that our CFO will give us a review of the budget, the overview, and some of the programmatic assumptions in this program, and do his normal excellent job at helping us to understand the budget. All of the board members have also been asked to take a look at the school-based budgets and be so you can get your questions answered. So if you, like myself, have 2 to 3 funding positions, reductions in your school budgets, that maybe you can ask those questions, because I was a little surprised myself. I thought we had status quo or an increase because of our increase in funding. So with that, those are my opening remarks, and our illustrious CFO, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Woods. Good evening, board members. I don't have a new presentation tonight, but if we need to, I did ask Admir to have the presentation from last week in case we want to refer to any of it. And I'll just give you kind of a quick overview or recap, just to kind of remind everybody where we are, and as much for me to kind of get my head back into it, I guess, where we are. So there's 2. Well, actually, I guess if we could go, maybe we can go to the second page, please. We have that up. So there's 2 main deliverables in each budget year historically. So there's the 4-year plan, and then there's the budget, which the budget is primarily the general fund budget. But we also include food service grants. This year is going to be really a 3-step process for our overall fiscal budget. So April 21st, the board, we submitted to the board, and the board approved our 4-year financial plan. And that is, it's required to be done by the end of April every year, and that's written into law. So our 4-year plan, and this first page here too really just kind of outlines our overall 4-year financial plan, with the first year being highlighted in green, and that being the 21-22 budget year. This really sets the overall framework for the budget and for funding. So state aid, which is the largest component of our general fund budget, and then also whatever gap we have in our budget projection, including the 21-22 year and in the next several years. So we always look at our budget in a multi-year perspective, because because sometimes there are one-time events, one-time sort of transitional things that impact the budget that will show up in such a view. And in this case, obviously, there is a deficit that we're projecting in 21-22, and we've talked about that's really related to that mismatch between transportation aid and transportation expense. So that's, this is really the first time since I've been in this role that we've seen projections that actually have no significant deficits in the future years. And again, these are projections, so they're subject to change. We tend to try to make them conservative, so that way, we have the ability to close deficits that open up in future years. But in large part, that increase in state aid in 21-22, and then also the increase in foundation aid that is put into legislation for the next 2 years through 23-24 is what's driving our increases in revenues, and ultimately what drives that based on our current projected run rate of expenditures, this structural balance in the general fund. So if we can, I'm going to go to the next page, if we can. The next component of our budget, and this really isn't discussed on this page, but I'll go over it here, is the general fund budget. So again, this is really the first budget that I've been part of where we haven't had significant and recurring annual deficits either in the next fiscal year or in future years, that we had to make some sort of reduction in the process. So largely, this is a maintenance of effort budget that is in our general fund at this point. So, and again, state aid increases are what drive it. So we are in the budget, we are assuming that we're back in person. So what that primarily means is that transportation. So transportation costs have been depressed significantly. 30 million under budget probably is where we'll be this year because we haven't been transporting as many students. On the assumption that we are back to full in-person instruction, we do have transportation included in the expenditure base for next year and in future years. We also make the assumption that our students are back in class and that we're using the best, our best assumptions for student count as we have, and that includes both total student counts, special education, multilingual, in all of that data. So that is also included in there, and that drives the school-based budgets. Our expectation is that we will have a proposed budget that we plan to send out to the board on Friday and also include in the board packet for your consideration and approval at next week's board meeting. So between now and then, we hope to gather questions, address questions and concerns, and be ready to have the general fund budget adopted. I did send yesterday. I sent another copy of this presentation and the full budget packet that we reviewed last week. I sent that yesterday. I also sent it again this afternoon, a little before 4. And I included in there the revised school-based budgets. There's not a significant amount of changes in the school-based budgets. We did add like our matching, so where we take these partial positions and we make them whole, we make sure that we can fill full positions. We found a couple instances where there were positions that we thought were in there, we caught, and then we corrected those. But largely, it is very similar to the school-based budget document that we looked at previously. So on Friday, we hope to have a full budget with all of the details that you see that come out of Munis, have that fully reconciled to the school-based budgets, and then submit that to the board. Now, what's not in that budget, and this is perhaps the most critical piece, is that the federal funds that are forthcoming, these federal stimulus funds, are not included in the general fund budget. They're not included in the school-based budgets. This is, as I was mentioning, that there's sort of normally 2. Now we have 3 different deliverables. So we have another big step after the general fund budget is completed, and that we have to complete the process for the applications for the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding. So we have we just received word that the application for the ESSER 2 funding, which is it's about 90 million. That application was just released a couple days ago, and the application is due on June 15th. Earlier today, the ESSER 3 funding, 201 million. We received another communication from the Education Department, and there's a two-part process for that application. May 24th, we have to have a signed assurances document, and then the actual application will be released, it's said in the coming weeks, so it could be a couple weeks out until we actually see that, that application for the ESSER 3 funding. Those funds are $290 million over 3 years. So if you looked at that evenly, and that doesn't mean that they will be spent evenly, but if they are spent evenly, you're looking at a little under $100 million in supplemental funding for three years. On Saturday, this coming Saturday, we're going to hold our second of the public hearings where we'll receive input on the use of these federal funds. So, you know, I'll be at that meeting. I'll plan to give a slightly updated presentation from what I had done on April 29th, but that will be the second hearing on Saturday. And then I forget the exact date of the third one, but that's coming up as well. So we have these public hearings that are coming up that I think it would be important. As many, I suppose, board members as can attend and participate in those would be helpful. You know, and through that process, that will go a long way towards determining how these funds will be spent. Again, the federal funding is short-term in duration. It has a 3-year window. So any spending that is in there, it has to be understood that it is either short-term, that it will be short-term in duration, or that it will be picked up by some other funding source. So we may do some transformative things where we add things in this federal funding, and then over the course of time, things that aren't working, maybe that are done in the general fund, those things will be replaced with with the continuation of new programs that are added through the federal funding. That's one alternate that might happen with that. Any way you look at it, it's certainly transformative. This federal funding that is coming. And again, I have to stress that it is not reflected in the budgets that you have seen so far. It is not reflected in the school-based budgets. And I think a lot of the discussions in the coming weeks over, you know, some of these major investments that we want to do, they all have to be in the context of that is separate and apart from the general fund budget, which we have before you. So there will be things that happen in the federal funding that will be included into the school-based budgets, I suspect. So there'll be probably a revision to the school-based budgets to the extent that there are things that largely are directly attached to the schools. But that's really a process that's after this general fund budget process. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because sometimes I've seen some confusion, and it's tough keeping all these things straight. But it is separate from the general fund, all this federal funding, which is a good thing. We're not in a position right now where we have to say we have to take this federal funding to close the budget gap. That's not the case. This federal funding is intended to be for supplemental spending, supplemental things to improve student achievement, to bring all of our kids back. And you know, we're looking forward over the next several weeks to developing that plan in conjunction with the board. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I just wanted to give that brief update of where we are with our budget and with the federal funding, and then I guess open it up to if there's specific questions we wanted to go over, or certainly comments that folks have. So thank you.
Okay, can we go back to the picture? Okay, board members, let's see, I see two hands up. I'm not sure who they are. Let's see if I can see the participants. There are two hands.
I'm one, Miss Woods, if you can't see my hand.
Okay, okay, Sharon Belton Cotman, and then Larry Scott. You have questions?
Mr. Cotman was first, Mrs. Woods.
Okay, Larry Scott, and then President Belton Cotman.
I'll be quick. Thank you, President Cotman and Ms. Woods. Mr. Pritchard, if you could just, you already answered, I think, one question that Ms. Woods raised at the start and that we seemed to be clear on last week. The federal stimulus is devoted toward, or is to be directed towards addressing the needs as a result of interrupted schooling from the pandemic. Our general fund isn't necessarily going to be allocating anything that's directed towards that supplemental programming for students to get back to where they need to be. The other thing was, last week, I think it was the superintendent made it clear that this budget, the proposed budget, reflects returning all of our students in person 5 days a week. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the budget is designed around kind of taking us back 2 years to what the budget would look like before the pandemic, where what does it take to get all of our students to and from school, what costs are needed in the schools, is staffing related, and so forth. So yeah, it is designed around students returning. There are some supplemental things that we put in there. I think we discussed that there was we have what we call an emergency project, that there may be additional costs that we have that we want to make sure we could cover if we need to in the general fund, related to extra cleaning or PPE equipment, things like that might be needed. And certainly some additional funding, because there's probably some uncertainty as to how the overall charter school student counts will impact things. But yes, the budget is designed around students returning sort of to what it was before COVID hit.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. That's all I had right now. Thank you, Ms. Woods.
Okay. When you say to returning to what we have now, are you saying that you're not assuming that 40% of the children will still be being remote?
I don't have any assumption in there for remote learning, I guess I would say. It's the teachers that are doing that now, whether they be remote or in person, are in there. I think that maybe is more of a question of how the actual structure of the school would be set up. If all students are back versus if there is a portion of students that are still at home, how does that doesn't necessarily change the number of staff that we have in the schools, or at least teachers in the schools that are teaching them.
Okay. Mrs. Cotman?
Thank you, Chairperson Woods. So I have a couple of questions. I just need to be clear on some things. The New York State weights, they are given to us by the state. On each one of these school-based budgets, there's a New York State weight.
Yeah, you are. If you're referring to on the school-based budgets, those weighting systems, those are the weighting systems that are utilized in the transparency reporting that the state does. So they in addition to every student counting as one student, they also have a weighting that adds an additional supplemental amount based on whether they be students with disabilities, multilingual or ELL students, or free and reduced price lunch. So those weights are supplemental above the 1.0 that each student would be counted towards. And that's part of the foundation aid formula. Foundation aid formula actually does do a weighting of students to account for the fact that some students require additional funding based on their individual needs. So special education's an obvious one, that they're in classes with more, you know, a lower student to teacher ratio plus an aide in the class very often, and that increases the cost of addressing the needs of those students. So that's reflected.
I want to make sure the board members are following me. You know, if you take a look at the school, you'll see a box for budget per pupil. Then underneath that, you'll see budgeted enrollment, and then New York State weights. My question here is, how does that translate into our school-based budget? Do we give any additional credit or any additional resources based on these weights?
So our system is not based on a weighted student formula, and Dr. Cash has kind of explained that many times, that he's dubious as to whether those make sense to do the weighting. The state, however, does. They utilize that in their transparency, and yes, students, for example, students with disabilities and multilingual, those departments actually budget directly into the school-based budgets what those students need. So if you have students that have a certain need, special education being a good example, they will allocate based on the needs of the students in those schools, the funding or the teachers and the aides and related services that is needed for them. So those are done by the department. They're not done such that we create an overall spending allocation for the school and then transfer that to the school and let them make the decisions. It's sort of a hybrid model where you have these departments, multilingual, CTE is similar, and special education, that they'll budget the staff appropriately based on the students that are budgeted at that school.
So I thought you were going to say that. So I guess my question here is that we as a board agreed that we would, that this district would start moving toward an equity based system. Okay. And so as I went through these budgets, you know, I see some schools that have 50 combined of L's and special ed, 77%. I see all sorts of high numbers. Okay. But when I look at the special ed rooms, I see smaller numbers or whatever. So I need the special ed department to explain to me how they determine what schools should get how many students. Because if you go through this, okay, you will see that some schools have, I just did two. Some schools have as many as 11 special ed classes with 449 students. 11 special ed classes, where another school with 777 students would only have 6 special ed classes. Okay, so what I'm curious to know from the special ed department is, how are you determining where you're going to put these special ed children? Because here's my thrust on this. Okay, if you have a school with 11 special ed classes, okay, and the state provides a weighting system, I want to know how this district or anyone in any of our departments overlooked the fact that the state has acknowledged that there's a need for additional support for these children in the foundation formula. Because I'm really getting confused here, because what I'm starting to see is that what people are telling me is that the resources are not flowing to the children. Okay? So we have a lot of special ed children who are not, or a lot of schools that are not receiving the extra resources that the principals and the staff feel that they need based on the population that is there. Now, there's a formula that exists, okay? So that's a question of mine. The other question I have is, the federal government has also said that the schools with the highest level of poverty rate are entitled to more money, that they are supposed to receive more resources. Let's not say money, let's say more resources. How is that being taken into consideration as we move forward? Because if we're not giving any additional weight to the fact that this one particular school I was looking at has a combined of 77% special ed and L students. Okay, if we're not giving any additional support to that building, how can we be sure that when the formulas are done for the federal money, that these things will be taken into consideration? I'm just totally confused how it's a flat, basically, formula that exists. And so my third question is about Title IX, about the title money. Okay.
Can we talk about the first, Mrs. Cotman?
Oh, sure.
You're on a lot. Because I know, and Dr. Cash actually addressed a lot of this last week, because what happens is, you know, to your point, schools use that rationale when they're requesting, they're putting their request in through their associate superintendents. And I believe Dr. Cash said last week he approved about 30 additional positions. So when schools, to your point, so when schools say, this is what I need and this is why, I have 11 special ed classes, and then they'll do a percentage of what their percentage of special ed students is. So I need this additional support, as you said, or I need this additional whatever it may be. And Dr. Cash has approved almost 30 of those already that have been brought to them. So that rationale is used to support that. So that's how, when you ask where is the difference in these schools, that's exactly where it's at.
Well, Dr. Brown Hall, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is maybe a tad bit different. What I'm saying here is that if we are owning our data, okay, a principal shouldn't have to ask to receive supplements. They should be automatically provided. You have acknowledged that in this particular building, you have sent 77% of this population has students with disabilities and L's. Okay, so that's not an ownership. That's not an ownership for the principal. That's an ownership of the district. Okay, so what I'm trying to get to is that if we're talking about an equitable formula, where does the equity come into play here? Okay, because with the budget. With the budgets, okay.
Very good
all right.
Question.
Where does how are we? In other words, if I was looking at this particular school, I got to go all the way to the state. I got to see what the state is telling me about this particular school. How are they performing? What's going on in that building? Where is the ownership of data for each school? Because somehow or another, someone made the decision to put 11 special ed classes in one building. Okay, 11. But in another school building, they made the decision to only put 4 with double the children. So my question is, who's guiding these? I mean, in modern day time, it would seem that we would have a system set up that if someone tried to add another special ed class into a building that's already, quote unquote, highly saturated, that the system would say, oh, no, there's a benchmark. You can't put more than 15 or 12 special ed classes in a school that only has 400 children. You know, I'm just trying to.
Right. To your point, though, I mean, that might be when we do the special ed discussion at the June student achievement meeting, that will be a great time to actually dig into that. But I want to go back to something you brought up, and you bring it up every year about the formulas for the school-based budgets, right? And we talked about, I believe it was 2 years ago, we said that would be a focus at the finance and operations meetings going forward, really digging into how we can differentiate the formulas used to actually supply school-based budgets that are more equitable or more, as you say, using our data to be funding-based. But we come to these meetings, our work sessions every month, and other things creep up in the work session, and you never get really a chance to get to that, and then it hadn't been added to the agenda for a while. But again, that's very much so effective and efficient work that can be done during the board work sessions under finance and ops, because it would have a direct correlation on student achievement, which, as you stressed before, the Council of Great City Schools training that you went to said that all board meetings and work sessions really should be focused on student achievement. So that would tie right into that, really starting as soon as the work sessions begin again in September, and having at Finance and Ops every single month really dissecting the school-based budget formulas so that the board can say, when we get around to budget time, these are the school-based budget formulas we should be using district-wide, so we can provide whatever different weighting for schools with higher ELLs or schools with higher special ed. So to your point, so they don't have to wait, and principals then don't have to ask for additional positions that would support their schools based on the percentages of of students they have. That's a very good point, Mrs. Scottman.
Thank you, Dr. Brown Hall. But I guess when we passed the equity resolution, I somehow or another thought that the staff would start changing their thought processes and start realizing that that there was inequity that was built into the system. And so, when I go through these budgets for each school, I have to share that it makes me a little sad. It makes me a little sad often. Today was one of those days where I spent a lot of time going through this. It makes me sad because I realize that the people who are making the decisions really don't necessarily get it. That when you do certain things, the impact that is happening in these schools. And then when I see that you have this type of ratio in a building, and they don't even have maybe a math teacher, or they don't have like ads, I should say ads to the English department or ads to the. It worries me. It keeps resounding in my mind that the system is designed to do what it's built to do. Okay, and this is like Caddyshack for me, because I've been going over this over and over and over again. And so
Groundhog Day,
Groundhog Day, yeah, Caddy, whatever it was, whatever. But just a whole movie. But anyway, I just want to share that with you because as I look at this, I understand if you have an international school. What I don't understand is that school somehow or another, that weight does not equal more support in this building for the students that exist. I don't get it. It's almost like the have and the have nots. We have one school that has 23 23 teacher aides and assistants. 23. Okay, so I was like, okay, let me take a look at that school. Why do they get 23? Everybody else is struggling with, and then I did the math. I took out this, I took out that, and I'm like, how does this school every year end up walking away with so many teacher aides? And every year when I ask that question, they tell me because they've always had them. Okay, they've always had them. And so this particular school can afford to buy assistants and aides, whereas another school dealing with other issues can't afford to buy them. And that's what the concern is for me. Where does the equity start?
But and to that point, that's a very good question. I think developing and you talked about this before, because it's not just looking at the number of ELL and the number of special ed, but it's also taking into account the average daily attendance for a school and take into account their suspension rate, right? When you want to start putting in all the other variables that could adjust their school-based budget. But what I would suggest is that we definitely, again, go back to the drawing board, see what we have, see what we can change in the school-based budget for the 21-22 school year, so that we can definitely have those much needed discussions, because like you said, you don't want this to be Groundhog Day again. Now, what I will say to you, Mrs. Cottman, is that most of the principals have already, I know that there's schools that have gotten additional, over 10 positions, but they have already, for this coming school year, put in their requests. Dr. Cash has approved them, but in order to alleviate those requests for next year, I would suggest that there'll be summer work on looking at school-based budgeting formulas, then have the first topic, September, October, November, in the finance and ops meetings is really digging into those. Depending on who the chair is, making sure that that's their focus for the first 3 meetings at least.
Thank you, Dr. Brown Hall. The only other thing is, and I'll wrap up, is Burgard. We just had Burgard before us, and I'm looking at Burgard, and I'm looking at their grant. I think that was a $250,000 grant, was it? I don't remember quite what the number is. Okay. And so when I look at Burgard, Toya Wilson is hands up. Toya can speak on it. Okay, I don't see the ad. I don't see where. I need some help in seeing how that grant improved that school building. I need some help with that because it's not spelled out in this example.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are correct, Ms. Cotman. The grant that the Project Aware grant is not in this budget, and I believe it has something to do with the way the timelines of the distribution of the grant actually plays out. But what I can tell you is that on top of what you see in this budget is actually another $420,000 that the school gets annually, and they use that money to pay for 3 positions. Right now, that's the project administrator, Ms. Adams, you heard from tonight. Their community education leader, and an additional social worker. So on top of the social workers they have allocated there in the budget, they get another social worker. And then they get, the rest of it they use as funding to support, as you saw, the way that room was redesigned, how that was paid for, the different workshops and professional development that the staff actually participates in. So that is not allocated in there, and I believe it has to do with the timeline of the grant. But I will say that Burgard, I met with them early on, and Dr. Cash was very gracious in awarding 7 FTEs overall that they were unbudgeted, and we actually had them put into the budget prior to our big budget meeting in which we all came together to review the meeting or to review their budgets. So they are showing up in this document right now. If you can remember, that happened later in the summer last year. This year, we were trying to be ahead of it and make sure that we allocated that now. So that was put into their budget, and it is evident there now.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I knew about the 7 because my question was clear to Dr. Cash. How can this school, a CSI school, be losing staff after a pandemic? And so I'm glad to see that it's at least in here. And so the money that's listed down here for grants, what is that? That's just the Title IV money?
Money that they were awarded through their CSI standard, their CSI status, their comprehensive support and improvement status. The other thing we should note that I don't believe is noted here is that they have been identified as a community school. Yay for next year. Wow. Additional funding, I believe, is just over 200,000, maybe closer to 250. We can get that number for you.
250,000, correct, Toya.
Yes. So that is not, you don't see that allocated here in the budget right now, but it is money that the school will be able to use to support the implementation of the community school status.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You notice that those dollars, that $400 and something is on page 57 of the grants budget for Project Aware.
Mr. Hurd, I believe you were next.
But it's not in this budget, so this is confusing. You know, it's not in the school-based. Help me with this. It's not in the school-based budget, but it's included in the grant.
I think that might be a question maybe Mr. Pritchard can answer.
Yeah, it's listed on page 57.
I see it.
Of the grant. You see it?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I'm just curious why is it here and it's not in the budget?
Oh, I'll get you guys an answer. I don't have an answer right now, but I'm going to circle back with you as soon as I have it.
I think Maria.
And just so everyone.
I think Maria was about to answer. Maria?
Okay.
Well, I do have a partial answer, and I can also investigate and get a more thorough answer from the grants department. But that grant, their budget year is completely different than our fiscal year. So the current grant goes through the end of September. So a new budget won't be written until then. Those positions that were spoken of, they're budgeted in Tanja Williams' department, not to the school, even though those 3 positions do go to Burgard. So the grant was budgeted, you don't see it in the school-based budget, we see it in her department budget as a grant, and it's not going to be written until, or it's not due again to write another budget until the end of September. They are intending on keeping those positions at Burgard.
Does that answer your question, President?
It's the answer. I mean, if that's the answer, that's the answer. But it's really, I can't talk, I'm sorry, I can't handle that one, because that's not my understanding of how grants are supposed to be used. And so if it's not coming into the school, if we're not directly seeing it in the school, then why is it locked into another? I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't get it. Okay, thank you.
Terrence Hurd, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Woods, Chairwoman Woods. My question is, I went back and looked at the 2021 budget and comparing it to the 21-22 school year budget. And my first question has to deal with the athletic department. I don't see much variances in monies that's being sent to the schools for the athletics department. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because I'm looking at the athletic department rollout next year, proposed rollout for the unified sports program and the modified sports program. And I don't want next year to come around and suddenly an answer is going to be given saying that there's no money in the budget or we haven't calculated for the introduction of a robust modified sports program for the city of Buffalo and the public schools. So I'd like to know what monies are being set aside, for these upcoming programs and not just programs that's already running sustainable. And I know that we do have a small unified sports program and a small modified sports program, but they are uniquely based throughout our school district, and only several schools are being serviced. And as we talk about equity and talking about, having benefits afforded for all students, the question came up last week, the same thing with our music programs. What monies are being set aside for our music programs? I know that Dr. Cash gave the answer that is based on about the principal's needs for the schools and what criteria the school have needs are and how they're going to be placed and what the principal asks for. But with the upcoming budget coming up and with the extra monies that we're receiving, I think it's now time to place that into the budget so that we can be prepared for whatever programs that we're ready to roll out for the 2021-2022 school year.
Now, let me say that, not to interrupt Mr. Hurd, but let me just ask Jeff this question. Jeff, there is still a contingency line in the budget, correct? So that if there are, I know that as Nate expressed at the very beginning about the athletics program, that you guys are going to have a more robust discussion when Dr. Cash returns. So I believe there's a contingency line that can then be used for that. Am I correct, Jeff?
Yes, we have approximately I think $6.5 million contingency, and certainly some of that could be used for things like this. The other thing I want to reiterate is that expansions of programs may not be reflected in this budget, but none of the federal funding is reflected in here. None of the federal. So if federal funding can be used for certain things like that, that is not going to be reflected in this general fund budget. So I do need to make that clear as well. But yes, there are contingency funds that are in there. There is some growth. There's about $300,000 growth in the athletics department overall year over year. That is reflected in the general fund budget, but it does not reflect anything that might be added from the superintendent's holdback or any federal funding.
But the contingency funding is is based upon the whole district and not just the athletic department. So how much money is going to be set aside for the athletic department so that we can grow our programs and look to incorporate, like I said, a more robust athletic programs. And this is starting with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Well, again, that's what contingency is, right? It's unmarked right now. So after that robust discussion is had with Dr. Cash, as Nate indicated, then, you know, a dollar amount may be assessed to that.
Okay, we have other things that goes in play with this, because due to a lack of, you know, working with the athletic department, we're looking to like reestablish that relationship so we can move forward and working towards a goal that can reach all our kids that's in elementary schools and prepare them for, you know, another high school, you know, and revamp that program. So I would like to see separate, even though it's contingency money, I'd like to see separate money set aside just for that program that'll be earmarked, you know, in this budget so that it won't have any fail safes. We're looking at you said 6.5 million, but that money can go anywhere. I just want to make sure that we are prepared, and we have to go through something for the next school year saying that it won't be enough money available, or we need to save money, because even in this contingency budget, you also save money just in case for the end of the year, in case something else happens that you need to spend that money for. So I don't want money being held up or this program being held up just because of not planning for it for the next school year.
Right. No, I get your point completely. And as Jeff said also, the money from the other federal funding sources is not included in here, and that can probably be, you know, some money also. So unfortunately, I don't have a more solid answer for you, Mr. Hurd, and I can't say right now we'll allocate this amount of money for athletics. I'm not able to tell you that right now. But what I will say again is that after your robust discussion with Dr. Cash about Unified, Modified, and all those other athletic programs that you're inquiring about, Dr. Cash may be able to then say, okay, this amount of money may be allocated for that.
Can we hold off? Okay, we hold off for that. Thank you. Also, we just talked about one of the most crippling things that happened to our students is hygiene, and that deals with the clothing and cleaning. Also, I know that principals, you know, take monies, you know, set aside, you know, for schools that to help these children, just as Ms. Watson just stated earlier. Is there any way in this budget we can help set aside monies? Because if we can look about retaining students in our programs, and can be money set aside for that also. I would like to maybe see a partial portion that can reflect on children of need, and they come from poor areas or may not be able to afford, you know, new clothing or old clothing. And I know that it's a pot of money that the principals do receive, but I'd like to see some more monies allocated for this purpose for retaining our children in schools and hopefully keeping them from dropping out.
But keep in mind, we also work with so many community-based organizations that do just that. They help out significantly. I mean, there's so many. We have a compendium of all of the community-based organizations that help out in that fashion. And as you said, schools, teachers, they do so also. What I do want to request, though, is that a thought just came to me, because right now, when we're so far into the budget process, when new requests like this come up, I don't think it's the most opportune time. I think for next year, just going forward, keep in the back of all your heads that you may want to develop a separate process on how board members can say, you know, we need to consider this in the budget, we need to consider that in the budget, because right now is not the time to, I think, be bringing those things up, right? Although, to your point, with what you're asking, it's good that we do have those community-based organizations to take care of that. We may want to work with the Department of Student Support Services to figure out how we can enhance that and can enhance the work of our CBOs in that fashion.
Okay, thank you. And we did receive this budget 2 weeks ago, so I know the board did. So
like the budget process started in December, though. Jeff went over the entire schedule in December. Yeah. of the budget process. So that's why in the future, when Jeff gives the highlights of the entire budget timeline from December to approval in May, we may want to say as a board, we want to have a special session of what needs to be included or what our priorities are as a board, and that can be figured out ahead of time.
That sounds very fair. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Ms. Woods.
Okay, remember, board members, this is a draft budget. The superintendent drafts a budget and presents it to the board. The board makes the recommendations, suggestions, and can actually make amendments to the budget. So we have to approve this budget. And if there are concerns, we need to address it to the superintendent, but this is not a done deal. We have to approve a budget. So, there are a lot of areas in here that I believe we may have to have another meeting to bring concerns to the superintendent. Now, I know Larry Scott has his hand up, but I do want to just say that when we had the discussions at the last budget meeting, it was indicated that this was pretty much a maintenance of effort budget. So I was not expecting that when I went through the school-based budgets to see 2 and 3 positions eliminated from different schools, especially schools that are marked in the red as needing improvement, marked in the yellow as needing improvement. I'm going to go and let Larry Scott ask his question, but then I'm going to come back and ask what are and I'll give you the specific schools, Jeff, why do they have 2 and 3 positions cut from them? And see if we can get an understanding, because I truly was expecting that this was going to be an enhancement budget, and it doesn't appear to be so. So I'm sure you'll be able to go over that. Larry, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. I just wanted to comment on the special education staffing that we see in the school-based budgets. And to me, it's far more nuanced than just looking at the percentage of special ed students and how many teachers are in the budget. There isn't, I don't see in the school-based budgets an actual line item that shows the classrooms. It shows the special education classroom teachers. And so those could be special education teachers that are assigned to self-contained rooms or special education teachers that are doing integrated co-teaching in general ed classrooms. So you're going to have special ed teachers that are assigned to 6 or 8 students in a self-contained classroom, and you're going to have a special education teacher that could have far more than that on their caseload for students in co-teaching that have less severe need. The other issue is that as far as programming goes and the needs of students, you will have buildings that have, I think City Honors and Olmsted are 2 of those buildings that house programs for kids with autism that are in self-contained. And you want to have those programs consistently in those schools and not have students jumping from school to school in order for them to have access to the program that they need. And the same goes for students that have developmental disabilities. So I think it's far more nuanced than just looking at the percentage of students with disabilities in a building and then looking at the amount of special education teachers that are in that building. And in addition, when we see more aides and assistants, if you have more self-contained programs in a school, you're going to usually have more aides and assistants that are assigned to working with those self-contained classrooms. You also might have increased mental health staff that are specifically assigned to those self-contained classrooms and students that require more social emotional support. And I would just like to point out that if we, as a board, we do have that authority to make changes. We have that authority to do that as a whole board, not individual board members. And I'd like to just when we're looking at concerns in the school-based budgets and inequities, have more specifics as to which buildings and where, and really highlight where we believe those inequities exist. Because I think I heard something about a building having 77% students with disabilities. I'm not able to figure out which building that is. And if so, some of those specifics could be really outlined and highlighted for us to better understand the claims of inequities and for us to address them. That would be helpful for me. That is all for me, Ms. Woods. Thank you.
Okay, well, you were kind enough at the last meeting to point out that some of your priorities were attendance teachers and social workers. I thought you might be wanting to speak a little bit to some of the concerns you had.
I didn't speak on attendance teachers, no. But yes, I absolutely believe that reading teachers need to be a priority, as well as mental health staff.
Thank you. Jeff, if you could look at page 68, Bennett Montessori School 32. In the 2020, this current year's budget, they had staffing of 123.96. They are a school, they're one of my schools that is in need of improvement. When I looked at their budget, I was looking for things to help them, you know, with more teachers or addressing their needs. But what I see in here is that their staffing was reduced by 3.48 staff. They're reduced down to 120.48 staff. And I also noticed that their summer program, their extended learning summer program and Saturday program has 0, where it used to have $166,000. So can you speak to why schools in need of improvement would have reduced staff at a time when we seem to have significant resources that I would have expected to be a maintenance of effort or an enhanced programs for everything from, you know, trauma care, whatever. But can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, let me answer in a couple things there. So the one item, the last item you brought up was the ELT summer and Saturday programs. So the answer for that, and you'll see this, I believe, on just about all of the schools, is we did not, that summer programming is being developed right now. We did not have good enough data to include in there in these budgets. That's unfortunate at this point. The summer programming throughout the district is going to be greatly expanded this year. However, we do not have the data to include it in the school-based budget. So that's why you're seeing a 0 in this school. And I believe if you look at all of the schools, or most of the schools, you're going to similarly see in the 20, many of them, you're going to see, you're not going to see anything. I believe,
excuse me a moment on that. I specifically looked to see if that was the situation. And for several schools, Lovejoy, they have their Saturday programs in there, and they are increased. I went through several of the schools, and I don't know if maybe you were planning on using some extra federal money or what, but Drew Magnet is another one of my schools, and they have nothing, but several other schools, they have. The schools that are more equipped seem to have the Saturday programs, and my schools that are struggling don't. So that's why I raised the question. I didn't understand. It's a mismatch.
Yeah. So let me take the board to the final page of the budget. the summary page. And then I'm going to ask Maria if she can kind of jump in, because I think she can explain. I did ask this question of her, and I think she can explain exactly. But if you go to the final summary page and then look at the ELT summer and Saturday programs, you will see that the total that we have included in this school-based budget at this point is around 2.9 million. And that's the number that I'm pulling off of. It's the same number that we had last week as this week. If you then go to the 2021, you'll see
on which page are you on?
The final page of the budget, the absolute last page of the school-based budgets.
Okay.
It's 68 of 68 in the school-based budget that I sent at 4 o'clock today, and it's page 127 of the budget from last week. So you can look at either one of them, and you will see in there that we are missing about $6 million in the ELT summer and Saturday programs. Those dollars are, we did not have the details to allocate at this time. That's why they're not in there.
So before the board approves the budget, then you're saying we will actually have a complete budget, because I don't want to reiterate or go over the same areas that we raised at the last meeting, but there were 4 million, 5 million, 6.4 million in the contingencies. Almost the entire increase in the budget is sitting in 4 or 5 lines that were unallocated in contingency. And I was hoping that at some point that detail would be in here, because it would be impossible for anyone to approve a budget with the most, that level of contingency funding in 5 lines.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I could ask either Maria or if Ann Botticelli is on, somebody could probably explain where we are right now with the ELT programming for the summer. Because like I said, there are significant funds that are going to be spent on this. We did not have the details in order to put them in the school-based budget. And some of that may take longer than, it may go beyond next week to finalize the plans for summer, because I believe summer is probably where a lot of this is. But I'm hoping somebody can explain a little bit better than I can.
Yes, Ann, this is Ann. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Okay, great. So a lot of the summer programming and after school will be split between stimulus and Title I. So, for example, a lot of the ELT after school programming does come from the Title I budget, but we'll be increasing that funding using stimulus dollars as part of our proposal. The summer programming will largely come from the stimulus funding, but we're still in the process of canvassing schools to see which students would be recommended for the programs. Once we have more final lists, we'll be reaching out to parents to have them register their students. And at that point, I don't know how detailed Jeff gets with determining funds for each school, but we will have a much better sense in the near future of how many students will be joining us for summer programs.
So, Ann, you're not opening up the summer program to all students in the district? It sounds like they're real selected.
Well, it will vary by program. So our 7 to 12 is more of a credit recovery model, although there will be some accrual options offered. And then at pre-K to 6, we ask the schools to give us recommendations based on a number of variables, including students who might be receiving an incomplete for English or math, as well as looking at their social emotional needs, data from test results, that type of thing. And we would certainly not say no if a parent who didn't necessarily have their student recommended if they had a request. But we want to make sure that we're targeting the correct group of students. So students during the pre-K 6 program will revisit the learning from the school year. So they'll be focused on standards from the current school year. So not every student will see the same benefit from attending that particular program. There's also the Jumpstart program for newcomers to the country, grades K to 8. There's a Se Levanta program for bilingual students in K to 3. There is the Summer Say Yes camp that's available to students. So there's a number of different offerings. We have Mural Mania for grades 7 to 12. We're doing a spoken word session as well for grades 7 to 12. There'll be sports opportunities. So there's a number of different offerings for families. We're trying to find the best offering for each student.
Thank you for that. I also was thinking about young people who have done well. What are we doing? You know, it just seems like there should be some gifted and talented program or some kind of nature preserve or some kind of achievement, you know, program for those kids as well.
We are looking at different accrual options for some of the incoming 9th graders. So we're working to see if we'll be able to offer some opportunities for them to gain credits prior to entering the high school in September. And I know that there are obviously things like Mural Mania, et cetera, would not be targeted at students who need to recover a credit. But at the elementary, we can certainly talk about further opportunities. We spoke with the principals today about making sure that students have goals for the summer so that they know what they should be doing over the summer to stay on target. For example, using the mayor's reading program, the challenge, and setting targets for students how many books they should read over the summer. Making sure that they understand that Lexia and other programs are available to them to use as well so that they can work toward advancement, I suppose, in the new school year. But we want students to stay engaged with the coursework. So yes, there will be a lot of enrichment opportunities that will be provided during the Pre-K 6 program as well.
Okay, I see Jen McCosey's hand up. And Jeff, after Jen's probably going to ask a question about this summer program, but can you return to the other question about why schools are showing 2, 3, even some 4 position reductions in a time when we appeared to be looking for expansion and extensions or at least maintenance of effort. So Jen?
Member Woods. So kind of on the vein of what Board Member Evans Brown was asking, let's say that the majority of our students, based on COVID, based on all of the struggles throughout the school year, are identified as children who are in need of certain programs, right? Is there a cap on the students that are available to take on these programs, or are they actually, do we have the funding in case it seems as though almost, you know, majority of the students in every class are going to need some type of programming, or they're being suggested by the principals for programming? I'm just making sure that we are, you know, fully resourced, because this summer I feel like is going to have an abundance of requests for just to engage in more learning or keep folks, you know, keep our students on track for the next school year. So I'm just making sure that we are we're going to be able to, you know, accommodate each and every request from principals, and that we're not kind of saying, oh, okay, we got to put the limit on here and put these kids in another program. I feel like there's going to be a lot of children who might end up in the programs that they just need to be enhanced some more to make sure they're on par with the next school year. It just sounds as though it's not that it's limited, but we may have a whole lot of offerings, but can we afford if we need all the offerings and they're going to be completely overwhelmed?
I believe that we should be fine using the stimulus money for the summer programming, but I can defer to Jeff on that particular answer. But we do have the capacity in the sense that we could add additional sites for summer school if we had additional students. We have been working with the principals, though, to make sure that their recommendations are in line with the actual programming. So we want to target the right group of students so that they're not bored during summer school. There may be other options for those particular students depending on their needs. So we're just trying to make sure that we look at all of the offerings and make sure that the right students are recommended for particular programs.
Thank you. That's more the answer I'm looking for. If we feel like we can accommodate, you know, an overwhelming amount of students or an amount that we weren't expecting. And as long as we can accommodate, that's where it was.
Hey, if I
We
could
have
add,
the physical capacity, yes.
Jen, I would like to add, because your question really gets to the root of why that federal funding exists. The federal funding exists, one, to make sure that school districts, all school districts, have the resources to get students back to school and safely, and then have the resources to be able to provide extra services and support to catch them up and hopefully get them ahead. That is when if you go to the first line of why this federal funding exists, that is why it exists. And that's the job that we've got over the coming, really years, to figure out how to deploy that properly to make sure that we can address all the needs, some of which we probably haven't even identified for students, and how this funding can address it. But that's, you hit the nail on the head of why the federal funding has been allocated to us and to every other district.
Right. Thank you. I mean, I would just, not saying that this is our district's direction at all, but it just seems like this almost too good to be true thing, that even though this funding is coming, are we going to be able to, really implement this in the way that it's meant to be? I'm asking this more so because I was receiving texts around this. So thank you, because you guys clarified for the public too that this is exactly what this money is for, and our kids will be serviced over the summer. Thank you.
Terrence Hurd, is your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay. Back to you, our illustrious CFO.
Jen, my hand has been up, Paulette.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. President Cotton, please go ahead.
I have a question for Jeff. How are the teachers going to be paid this summer? Are they going to be paid per hourly or by 1/200?
I don't know what the program is going to be designed. I don't know the program design.
Kelly will be able to answer that question.
Jeff, I can answer that one. I can answer this, Ann. So it is dependent on program. The majority of the programs are full day, but there might be some programs where the students don't need to come for the full day and the teacher would only work half a day. So it varies. But at the pre-K 6, it is a full day program. High school will probably be a combination depending on student needs. At 7th and 8th is also a combination.
So it's been said that you're not going to have enough teachers if you're paying teachers hourly this summer. That's been said by numerous people. So I just want to put that bonnet in, that bee in your bonnet there. But I just want you to know. But anyway, back to my questions. I want to be clear, okay? I've been sitting here long enough when I ask questions, and I'm really serious about the questions that I ask and the answers that I want. And I do my research before I ask questions, okay? And so it's not hard. I mean, I don't want to tell the schools, but if you reference pages 63, 66, 69, 72, 86, page 108, page 85, page 81. These schools, it's blatant, okay? The questions have to be asked, okay? They have to be asked because when you compare what's going on, when you tell me that the decisions are being made by people who are being made in silos, this department is able to do this department is able to do this. It reminds me of something that a principal said to me recently. Mrs. Cotman, if we could just get all the departments to work together and put everything on one form, we wouldn't have to get 3 and 4 different forms asking us to fill out the same thing. It would be one form. When I'm talking about this budget system, okay, when I'm talking about the inequities that exist, okay, if they don't exist, then prove that they don't exist. But what I'm trying to basically say with this is that I'm very concerned that the haves continue to get theirs and the have-nots continue not to get theirs. Okay, and so when I look at a school that has 547 children, has 6 special ed classes, okay, and then I look at another school that has 449 children and has 11 special ed classes, that to me is a concern. Okay, and this is the pattern that has existed forever. Okay, so if staff is not, if we recently saw a decision was made about a mental health child where equity was not taken into consideration for that child, no one took into consideration the COVID factors that are involved in here, and I can't just assume that the adults are doing fair. Maybe they're not doing it intentionally, I'll give them that. But if the data is analyzed, there are patterns that exist within this budget, and it has to be addressed. It cannot continue. I even will go as far as to say it is our Achilles heel, that the right person with the right time, with the right data, working the right information can come at us and show that we have patterns of disparity that exist. Okay? That's what I have to say. I'm very aware of what goes on with special ed. I know the different type of classes. I know, different type of structures, et cetera, et cetera. That even needs to be analyzed. Why do some schools get certain classes and other schools don't? Okay, no one is trying to displace charters. No one is trying to displace special ed children. What we're trying to do is make sure that there is a benchmark that this district exists on, and that the funds flow fairly to the children accordingly. Okay, and that's what we're talking about here. Okay, and this has been a conversation for more than just 2 years. Okay, this is not a new conversation. Thank you.
Okay, in going along with that, the question that I asked, and I want to refer back to the person who has the answers and could give me the answers. Jeff, I'm just going to mention, I'm going to give you the 4 schools and see what comes up. Drew Magnet.
You do one school at a time, Ms. Woods.
Okay, well, I mentioned Bennett Park Montessori, and I mentioned the count, staffing count going from 123.96 down to 120.48. But I also want to point out Drew Magnet, my other school, is in the same situation. They're going from 56.09 down to 53. And Herman Belladille, another one of my schools, which is, that one's in good standing at least, they're dropping from 92.4 down to 89. Each of these schools, wait a minute.
Okay.
Let me just finish the question and then you can take it away. And also Emerson, one of my premier schools, has had previously 61.54 students this year, and they're dropping to 58.4. My point is simply, all 3 of these schools are losing at least 3 staff at a time when I wasn't expecting to see this, and I didn't understand why. So when I tried to find out, when I tried to say to Dr. Cash last time what's going on, he had said the schools were going to get a maintenance of effort. So I really shouldn't be seeing 3 and 4 people staff reductions. But he did say if the school lost a bunch of students.
Right, there you go.
But the problem is when you take and did these budgets, are you looking at bed day readings, or are you taking the counts from the end of the school year, or are you looking at the fact that in the trends of what happens to these schools, at the one picture time you take that count, they may be down 50 students, but you see clearly that during the year they regain those students. So is this reduction sensible? It can't be based upon a one shot when you know, if you look at any kind of trend data, they may be down at that one picture. I'd like to know if it's just a bed day count, or did you look at the year end? How did you get these counts? And are you looking at the fact that the students come back and the schools are back up to that count? But I just want to understand why these 4 schools are losing staff when I didn't expect it. I just didn't expect it.
Put it out, she's trying to get back in.
Okay, let me start at a high level, and then we can try to drill down into the schools a little bit. At a high level, the school-based budgets every year are formulated using the same formulas exist this year as last year. Every year, every school has changes. There are we don't need to pull it up, but over the last, we've lost roughly 5,000 students over the last 15 years. So every year we are declining. We are a district of declining enrollment, and overall, our schools shrink every year, primarily due to the growth in charter schools. So if we were to just blindly keep every school budget the same as it was the prior year, you would very quickly discover that we're overstaffing some schools, and then I guess the question is, would we be increasing schools that have growth in students, or would we keep those the same because we're keeping the ones that shrink the same? So the school-based budget process is designed around looking at what the best projections are for these schools every year, and they do reset themselves. And then every year, typically, we do add back positions that had previously been in the school that perhaps are no longer supportable because the population decreases, or there's other changes. Special education changes in the special ed population at the schools impacts things. Number of special ed classes impacts things, and so forth. So that is done to every school, and for every one that you see down, you could probably find one that is going up. So that's that. I believe the actual enrollment counts that are listed on the school-based budgets here are based on, I believe they're based on current enrollment as of, whether the date be March or April. I believe that's the case. Maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So it does take into account that things change throughout the year, but you will generally note that most schools have excess capacity, and the district itself has excess capacity. School 32, I believe, was the first school that you had listed.
Yes.
And what I recall, there is actually going to be a retirement there, and the teachers that are in at 32, and again, anyone can jump in if they can correct or add on what I'm saying, have to be certified. And I believe a decision was made that with this retirement, they were actually going to close a classroom in the coming year, which would reduce one teacher because that teacher is retiring. And then I know it also impacts the aides. So I believe that is the primary driver for School 32. You'll also note too that the number of attending students has been on the decline, and again that needs to, at a very high level, we have to recognize that the overall the number of students that are in schools has to, over time, has to be reflected in them, and whether that be going up or going down. Let me see if we can, Maria, I don't know if you're still on, if you wanted to maybe chime in on 32, and if we have, I don't know if we have a ready answer on the other schools, but if not, we could also follow up after this meeting.
Since Darlene Jesenau, I'm the associate over at School 32 Montessori, and you are correct that there is a retirement, and that we're trying to really solidify that program at Montessori. So there was a reduction there. The seats really match the number of staff that are in the building, so we are not losing any student seats. but due to the retirement, we did do a reduction, and there was a reduction in the aid. But we've also enhanced the art and music program at that school to provide the dance courses for our students to make sure that we keep students at that school because of the programming, because it's very unique onto Montessori.
When you talk about Montessori, I'm looking here. Am I reading this correctly? It appears you're saying that the student count is projected to go up to 852. Am I reading that correctly? I see 826 in this year and 852, so it's not going down.
Did you look at the actual for school 32? I believe last year's projected and actual, there's over 150 student different. So that has to be considered. Did you see that, Ms. Woods? You probably see it now that I pointed it out.
No, I don't. I don't see when you're comparing this year to next year. But I'm not going to be.
There's an orange line right next to it. The orange line is the actual.
Okay. Okay. So you're saying the count is the actual count is going down, even though the projected count is going up?
Yeah.
Maybe, I think I'm going to have to say, like Ms. Cotton, these seems to be divergent facts, and I don't want to take up a public meeting to go over that. So I can ask that later, or with a principal, from the principal. But are you going to say that's the same thing with Drew Magnet? Why these 4 schools I gave you, they're all losing 3 staff. So I mean, Drew Magnet is in good standing.
Their numbers went down also. Their enrollment numbers went down also.
And Marvin Daniels, a school in need of improvement, is losing 2 staff. I don't understand.
Is their enrollment increasing or decreasing? I can't, because I have the board meeting on my screen. I'm trying to scroll through the school-based budgets electronically, and mine are slow. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to get to that page.
This is Cassandra Wright. The enrollment at school number 37, Marvin J. Daniels, did decrease.
Okay, because Associate Superintendent, when we're looking at the problems that our students are facing, we've shifted to the dependence on more technology and they're learning online. What I expected or I thought I would see is increases in positions like IT coaches, literacy coaches, and instead what I see in say for instance Emerson is a reduction in that area. There's some things I just thought was logical, that are programs that we're relying on more, and that there would be an increase in those areas. So, can you tell me why, like Emerson, there would be a reduction in the IT coach and
Can I say one thing, Ms. Woods? Because you bring up a very good point. You said with the pandemic, you would hope to see an increase in ITC coaches and things of that nature. Please keep in mind that, we have another opportunity this Saturday to get input on how those federal dollars would be spent. And so I encourage you as a board member, the board members, to really to speak up and say, this is how some of that money should be spent. Because keep in mind, this is the O&M budget, but that would be a great use for some of that federal money, saying, we have more students who are technologically savvy. We need more ITC coaches. That might be used for the federal money. We just got through a pandemic. We need more literacy coaches. That might be a use for the federal dollars. That's not included in this budget. This is just the O&M. But for that separate pot of money that we have to get public input, input from the board members, that would be a great use of that money.
But that funding cannot be maintained. It's only going to be allocated over 3 years. And I would believe that the need for literacy coaches and IT dependence would be a consistent, permanent need.
Yep, and we don't know, right? We don't know to what extent we give the district a super boost and then we reduce and then we just reduce and maintain, right? So I think that's how we want to look at these fundings also.
Okay, Jeff, did anyone want to take a look at Herman Belladillo and explain why they're losing 3 school? You have the school-based budget. You send them to each of us, and we've been trying to take a look at them as we can. And I'm just raising these questions because these happen to be my schools, and I don't know if other board members have other schools. You've looked at your school-based budgets. You have questions. I don't want to dominate the questions, but these particular schools are concerned to me because they're all losing at least 3 staff.
But wouldn't it be more effective if you send those questions to us in an email? We can properly research them because we have over 60 schools and we can get those questions back to you. Very similar to the 3 pages of questions you submitted last week and we got the answers back to you.
I can send you those questions.
We appreciate it because then we can really talk to the principal. We can do our analysis also because we want to make sure we give you the most factual information. All board members, Ms. Woods.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Anytime.
As Dr. Brown Hall. But I do want to emphasize that the question of it's not a maintenance of effort budget is a concern. It's a strong concern.
And I think it goes back to how we would define maintenance of effort, Mrs. Woods. And so I think we'd have to agree to disagree there, what we define as maintenance of effort. I was trying to see if there's any other questions. Because we can definitely, again, and not just for you, Ms. Woods, but any board members that have further questions, we'll be able to answer those for you and hopefully get them back by close of business on Friday. Or if they're very involved or lengthy, give us the weekend and we'll get them to you by Monday for sure. Can we agree to that, Jeff?
Yes, and again, the school-based budget summary is just a small, basically a capture of the end result of the overall school-based budget. So within that there is a lot of detail and a lot of notes on what drives various changes, and that's all information that we would be very happy to be able to research. It's not as easy as looking at this and being able to explain it unless it was a question that had already come up. So yeah, we can look at any of the schools that board members would like to know as to what is causing significant changes, be it the makeup of the population, the size of the population, and then also some of the other factors that play out in terms of the class size and things like that are in the schools and based on the needs of those students. So we would be happy to provide those details.
Sharon Boughton-Cottman, Board President, you have your hand up. Oh, okay.
I need to know, because I'm confused here. I need to know how many other grants are inside of different departments' budgets that are earmarked for school buildings.
We can. So, Mrs. Cottman, on Wednesday's board meeting, so next Wednesday's board meeting, the you know how you get the grant report? So the grant report is actually going to be in there in the board packet, and it will list the grant and what schools it serves. For example, like the Model P20 grant, that grant comes to the district. That's where we have the administrators and they get their internship, and they're hired as a program coordinator in the school building. Well, that grant is not allocated until we assign the program coordinators to do their internships, right? And so we're in the process of doing that now. So you would not see that in the school-based budgets because we don't decide where the interns are placed till over the summer, right? But that grant is ran out of OSL, the Office of School Leadership. So that's just another example. But that entire grant report will be in, will be in the board document, the board docs for this coming Wednesday's meetings.
Okay, but this AWARE grant is specifically earmarked for Burgard High School. Okay. And I'm assuming that the staff reports to the superintendent, to the principal, right? Why isn't it referenced on their page?
I think I misled you when I answered before. It is earmarked for that school. I was trying to explain the timeline of the budget. These reflect the 21-22 school-based budgets, and that grant budget won't be written until that grant timeline, which is not until the fall. Right, so it's not written yet, but it's definitely earmarked for Burgard. And I know the intent is to maintain those 3 positions.
Okay, but did it show up last year then? You see what I'm saying? It should. Okay, I'm going to pull last year's budget to see if it ever showed up in the school.
That's fine.
Okay, because I'm trying to figure out when does it show up, because it looks like it just. I don't know. It's okay. All right. I'll pull it. Trust me, I got it. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Do any other board members have any questions they'd like to address to our Chief Fiscal Officer? Any more questions? Because we did go long in the first meeting, and I don't want to go too long on this one.
I don't see any other questions, Ms. Woods.
Well, in that case, then I guess we can I get a motion to, or do we need a motion to adjourn?
No
Don't need it?
motion.
Okay,
Right.
well, then this concludes the Finance and Ops work session. Thank you so much, Dr. Kathy Evans-Brown, for allowing us this time for additional questions. And anyone, as Jeff said, if you have some questions, you can see them, CC to them. The only other thing is we're going to receive this material on the same day of the board meeting next week, or will we be receiving it ahead of time so we can kind of look at it?
Our intent is to have the finalized budget available to the board, the finalized proposed budget by Friday, because Friday is when we have the board packet done. I'd like to get, as soon as possible, these questions. So I do have several questions already on some of these specific schools and specific grants that we will begin drafting tomorrow responses to. We'll get whatever we can as early as we can back out in writing to the board. If some of them, as Darren said, if some of them do take until early next week, we will have those as early next week as possible. So the sooner we can get some of the specific questions, the sooner we can then respond to them in detail.
Terrence Hurd?
Yes.
You have a question?
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Pritchard, can you please also look into the grants for the athletic department also and add that in? The grants that's been given to the athletic department for programs?
Yeah, we'll identify those for you.
Thank you, sir.
I have one question. I have one question, Ms. Woods. Okay, so the summer, I'm reading that there's $9,040 earmarked for the summer, or is it 2.9 million for 21?
Yeah, so again, the number that you see in the school-based budget is not a complete number for the summer program and for ELT. And rather than provide data that we knew was incorrect or very incomplete, it was left off largely. That's going to be another thing that we're going to try and provide. Understand that 20% of the ESSER 3 grant, so roughly $40 million minimally, has to go towards what they call learning loss. which addresses things like summer programming, extended day, extended school year, things like that. So I believe, and I think others can speak to this much better than I think we are going to have summer programs and extended learning programs over the next several years that dwarf anything that we've done in the past. Unfortunately, we don't have those budgets completed, and it's not reflected in this data here on the school-based budget. But that will be in large part something that will be discussed as we go through the allocations and the budget building for the federal funding.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm looking at the summary page of this budget because ESSER is not included.
Right.
So my question is, this summer, because ESSER is not in here, are we looking at $9,040,000 or are we looking at the $2.9 million for the summer?
No, again, what I'm going to do is provide a better detail for you. This is an apples and oranges comparison because we didn't have enough data to build the 21-22 budget for inclusion in this document. So we're going to give a reconciliation as best as we can for you, so it's explainable to everybody. Because I don't think I've explained it well, but again, I'm trying to reiterate that we've not included the normal costs that are included in summer and extended learning time because we don't have them sufficiently detailed yet to allocate them to schools. We will provide some sort of a reconciliation or explanation that I think will be that'll explain that for everybody, so it's a little clearer.
That's fair. Thank you.
So you're saying it will be the 9 million. It's just we don't have the details to put together to give it a proper supporting details, schedules, to add up to the 9 million. It's going to still be the 9 million. Is what she's saying. Yes.
I don't know what it's going to be, but like I said, I believe we are going to have summer and extended learning time spending that dwarfs, meaning it will be in excess of what we've spent in the past. I just don't know how long it will take to pull all those plans together, and I think describe that a bit. We're working on this now, and I'm hopeful that perhaps we can give a certain level of detail that will give the board some idea of the scale of these programs. But unfortunately, what you see on the summary page is it's not comparable, and it's not. I want to be able to explain it a little further once I can hopefully ask a few more questions and we can get some more details on what we're looking at.
Well, thank you. I'm just happy to know it's going to dwarf. It's going to be great. It's going to be bigger.
Can I interject one thing here about, I do expect that attendance teachers will be working year-round this year, because typically what happens in the summer is that we lose children. We can't afford to lose any more children, and we need those children in the buildings this summer, and we need to make sure we have them in place for September. We are in a critical state, and this is a national problem. This is just not unique to Buffalo. It is a national problem. Okay, and everyone in everyone on the Council of Great City Schools are allowing attendance teachers for the summer, or they don't call them truancy officers or whatever they call them. But anyway, we need to think about that. I really think it's important that we get a handle on these children as quickly as possible. Thank you.
And we've had them in years past, Mrs. Cotman, so I agree also.
Thank you.
Sharon, are you putting your hand back up? No? Okay, well then seeing no more questions, that this adjourns the Finance and Ops meeting. Thank you everyone for your patience. Thank you, Jeff, our CFO. Thank you, Dr. Brown, and thank you to the staff. We really appreciate you sticking with us and digging in and giving the answers to our questions.
Thank you all. Have a great evening, everyone. Be well.
You'll have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.